Chapter 279. Jianshun had a troubled expression. If the old man had made this request before he had returned, then he could have taken out the 5-colored stone for him to see. However, the 5-colored stone had already entered his dantian and was surrounded by the sword spirits. He could not take it out at all. Seeing the troubled expression on Jianshun's face, the old man slightly frowned. He said with some displeasure, "Don't worry. No matter how precious the 5-colored stone is, I, Tian Changqing, will not covet it. I only want to see the true appearance of the treasure." "Sir, I'm really sorry. I can't take out the 5-colored stone right now." Jianshun bitterly smiled. This group of people had come at far too much of a coincidence. They had come just as the 5-colored stone entered his dantian, which made it difficult for him to explain. After all, this was just too unbelievable. Even if he told them the truth, probably not many people would believe him. If you can't take it out, are you worried that our Elder Wu will covet your crappy treasure? Elder Wu has an important position in our Tianqing clan. How can he covet your crappy treasure? How much is your treasure worth? How can our Elder Wu care about it? Before the old man could say anything, quite a few people behind him began to talk at once. They all criticized Jianshun. Jianshun's face sank slightly. He clasped his hands at the old man and said, "Elder Wu, it's not that I don't want to show the treasure to you, but because of some unforeseen circumstances, I really can't take it out." Jianshun's words were neither haughty nor humble. There was a hint of coldness in them. If the old man continued to threaten him, he would not give him any face. "Stop with the lies. Who would believe your nonsense? You better take it out and let Elder Wu see it. With Elder Wu's status, how can he covet your item?" A young man standing behind Elder Wu coldly stared at Jianshun and coldly said, "Get out of the way, get out of the way." At this moment, a shout came from outside, and then the crowd surged. A tall and sturdy young man strode in from outside, and as soon as they saw this young man, the people crowded in the room made a path for him and respectfully called out, "Eldest young master." This person was none other than Qin Shao, who had rushed over upon hearing the news. "Nephew Shao, why are you here?" Upon seeing this young man, Elder Wu immediately revealed a slight smile on his face as he asked in an amiable tone. Qin Shao had an extraordinary position in the clan. Even though Elder Wu had a very important position in the Tianqing clan, he did not dare treat Qin Shao too harshly. Qin Shao glanced at Elder Wu and said indifferently, "Elder Wu, I should be the one asking you this. This is my brother Jianshun's residence. What are you all doing here?" After saying that, Qin Shao looked at the group of people behind Elder Wu and suddenly shouted, "All of you get out." The group of people behind Elder Wu were all yes men. They looked at each other, and in the end, they all gathered their gazes on Elder Wu. None of them were willing to leave. Seeing this, anger appeared on Qin Zhao's face. Just when he was about to shout again, a dignified voice suddenly rang out from outside the room. "All of you get out." Hearing the dignified voice, everyone in the room was slightly surprised. Although they did not see the person, the extremely familiar voice immediately made them think of the person with the greatest authority in the Tianqing clan. "Greetings to the Patriarch. Greetings to the Patriarch." The group of people in the room all bowed respectfully before retreating obediently. With the Patriarch's words, no one dared to remain in the room. The white-clothed Patriarch of the Tianqing clan walked into Jianshun's room with a few middle-aged men and old men behind him. "Greetings to the Patriarch." Elder Wu bowed towards the Patriarch of the Tianqing clan. "Father, you finally come." Elder Wu has brought a large group of people into Brother Jianshun's room for no apparent reason. That's just too much. If news of this spreads, how will our Tianqing clan have the face to entertain guests? Qin Shao said with great dissatisfaction. The Patriarch of the Tianqing clan looked at Elder Wu and said indifferently, "Elder Wu, little brother is currently a guest of our Tianqing clan. You were in the wrong in the first place when you brought people to intrude into little brother's residence. If news of this spreads, where will our Tianqing clan stand? Why don't you apologize to little brother Jianshun?" Elder Wu's expression changed slightly. He looked at the Patriarch of the Tianqing clan in disbelief. He really could not understand. With his status as a dignified elder, why would he need to apologize to a member of the younger generation? Although he was dissatisfied, he did not dare to disobey the patriarch of the Tianqin clan's orders. He could only unwillingly apologize to Jinshin. Little brother, I just heard from the guards that your place is emitting a very strong, five-colored auspicious light. I wonder what's going on. I wonder what this is, the patriarch of the Tianqin clan said to Jinshin with a smile. His tone was gentle, and he did not pressure Jinshin like a patriarch. Jinshin smiled bitterly. The five-colored rock really was a disaster. It had caused some trouble in the treasure pavilion earlier, but it was all thanks to Qin Zhao's appearance that the matter did not escalate. Now, even the patriarch of the Tianqin clan had been alerted. Patriarch, I bought a wondrous stone in the treasure pavilion earlier. The five-colored light came from the wondrous stone, Jinshin explained. Oh, there's actually such a wondrous stone? The patriarch of the Tianqin clan immediately became interested. He stared at Jinshin with shining eyes and said, Little brother, may I ask what this wondrous stone is? It's so wondrous that it can even give off an intense, five-colored, auspicious light. Can you show it to me? The patriarch of the Tianqin clan looked at Jinshin with hope. Patriarch, the wondrous stone has mysteriously entered my body earlier. I can't take it out. Jinshin was helpless. What? You've entered your body today? The patriarch of the Tianqin clan was shocked, along with some disbelief. Looks like this wondrous stone is a supreme treasure. I read about this in some ancient records. Legend has it that some supreme treasures are extremely powerful and can be absorbed into a person's body at will. It's extremely wondrous. A white-haired, wrinkled old man behind the patriarch of the Tianqin clan sighed emotionally. Supreme treasure? Elder Zhua, just how powerful is this supreme treasure? The patriarch of the Tianqin clan was amazed. He humbly asked the old man behind him for advice. The old man shook his head. Patriarch, there are extremely few records about supreme treasures in the records. That's all I know. The patriarch of the Tianqin clan became disappointed when he heard that. He then looked at Jinshin with mixed feelings. After a moment of silence, he gently sighed, Little brother, it's your fortune to be able to find such a treasure. However, a man's wealth is his own ruin. I've heard that quite a few people know about the wonders of your five-colored stone in the treasure pavilion, so you need to be more careful in the future, just in case someone tries to harm you in secret. Thank you for the reminder, Patriarch. Jinshin clasped his hands in thanks. Afterwards, the patriarch of the Tianqin clan left with a group of people. He did not ask too much about the five-colored stone. Brother Jinshin, you have such a great treasure on you, so you need to be careful. Although no one dares to do anything to you in Walrant City, once you leave the city, no one will fear you at all. Someone might try to steal this treasure from you. Qin Xiao reminded Jinshin out of kindness. Afterwards, Qin Xiao stayed for a while longer before leaving. Mingdong also came to check on the situation. Seeing that there was nothing wrong, he left Jinshin's room as well. He returned to his residence and worked hard to increase his strength. After the people from the Tianqin clan came to repair the damaged door, Jinshin immediately shut the door and locked himself in the room to diligently cultivate. With the arrival of the mercenary gathering, he had to increase his strength as quickly as possible. In the blink of an eye, the sky darkened. Late at night, Jinshin sat on the bed in the pitch-black and silent room as he constantly absorbed the energy within the monster core. Creak! With a soft sound, the door to Jinshin's room was opened. With the sound of gentle footsteps, a black figure slowly walked in from outside. Jinshin slowly opened his eyes. He looked at the black figure calmly and said, May I ask why you have come so late at night? Although he was focused on cultivation, Jinshin had always maintained a trace of vigilance towards the outside world. As a result, he sensed the black figure as soon as it entered the room. The room was pitch black and there were no candles lit. The black figure walked to a table in the room with great familiarity and sat down. Following that, an old voice rang out. Jinshin, I won't beat around the bush with you. I want to buy the five-colored stone in your possession. Just tell me what you want. Jinshin chuckled. So it's Elder Wu. However, Elder Wu is destined to return disappointed this time. I've already said it during the day. The five-colored stone has already entered my body and escaped my control. Oomph, Jianshun, don't try to quibble with me. Do you think I'll believe your nonsense? I don't want to waste my breath with you. The five-colored stone will only cause trouble for you if you have it. It'll be a disaster sooner or later. Are you willing to sell it or not? Elder Wu's voice carried a trace of impatience. Jianshun's face darkened with Elder Wu's words. Since Elder Wu had already said so much, he could not be bothered to be courteous. He directly replied coldly, I'm not selling. Chapter 280. In the following period of time, Jianshun rarely went out. He shut himself in his room and cultivated. He kept a very low profile in the Tianqin clan, only occasionally sparring with the battle-crazed Qin Shao. Elder Wu, who was constantly thinking about the five-colored stone, did not continue to look for Jianshun. He seemed to have completely disappeared from the Tianqin clan, never appearing before Jianshun again. After a month passed like this, Jianshun used the monster cores to cultivate and raise his strength to the high-level Great Saint Master level. Afterwards, Jianshun spent half a month to stabilize his cultivation. After completely eliminating the hidden dangers caused by using monster cores to cultivate, he continued to absorb the energy within the monster cores to cultivate. After a month and a half, the waves caused by the five-colored stone in the Tianqin clan calmed down. It was as if everyone had forgotten about this matter. During this period of time, Ming Dong did not remain idle. He learned from Jianshun and shut himself in his room to absorb the energy within the monster cores to cultivate, working hard to increase his strength. In the morning 10 days later, the door to Jianshun's room that had been tightly shut for several days finally opened. A white-robed Jianshun slowly walked out. Jianshun glanced at the nearby room where Ming Dong lived. He saw that the door was tightly shut and strands of obscure energy rippled out from within. Ming Dong was still cultivating inside. Jianshun deeply breathed in the refreshing morning air and muttered, It's been almost 2 months since I've been in the Tianqin clan. Presumably, the people of the Tianqin clan will be setting off for Mercenary City soon. Jianshun glanced at the independent courtyard where Qin Shao lived. After a slight hesitation, he walked over in the end. He still needed to ask Qin Shao about the exact departure date of the Tianqin clan. When Jianshun arrived at the independent courtyard where Qin Shao lived, he was stopped by a guard at the entrance. Brother, is Qin Shao inside? Jianshun clasped his hands and asked. The young master went to the martial arts field early in the morning. He's not in the room, the guard replied expressionlessly. Afterwards, Jianshun made his way to the martial arts field. During the days he had been in the Tianqin clan, Jianshun had often been dragged to the martial arts field by Qin Shao, so he was extremely familiar with it. Just as Jianshun passed by a garden, the melodious sound of a zither suddenly rang out from a nearby pavilion. The sound was gentle, but it seemed to possess a strange charm. It was actually able to resonate with the sound of the zither when it reached the ears of those who heard it. Jianshun was attracted by the zither sound and instinctively stopped. He turned his head in the direction of the pavilion and saw a woman in a white dress sitting in the pavilion with her back to him. Following the gentle movements of her slender fingers, a beautiful zither sound rang out. Jianshun made his way to the pavilion and arrived behind the woman in the white dress very quickly. The woman's long black hair cascaded down her back very casually. Her face was covered with white gauze, which completely covered her face. It was impossible to see what she looked like. However, from the exposed skin on the woman's face and her near-perfect figure, it was still possible to imagine that she was definitely a heavenly beauty. The woman was the second miss of the Tianqin clan. Very quickly, the second miss of the Tianqin clan finished playing her zither. She turned her head and glanced at Jianshun, who was standing behind her. She gently asked, Could it be that young master is also someone who likes the zither? The second miss of the in-laws family had a very lively voice. It was as beautiful as a lark's voice, causing people's hearts to tremble. If it was someone with a weak heart, they would probably be mesmerized by this voice on the spot. Jianshun gently smiled. Miss, your zither music is very beautiful. Although I don't know how to play the zither, I was still attracted by your music. The second miss of the Tianqin clan smiled sweetly and gently said, "Thank you for your praise, young master." Jinshin smiled and said, "Miss, your zither playing must have reached the point of perfection long ago. You can actually play such a heavenly song that can make people's heartstrings rise and fall with the zither sound. You are truly admirable. Although I like the zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting, and have been studying them since I was young, I am still nowhere close to the purity of the flames that young master speaks of. The reason why the zither music is so beautiful is all because of this good zither." The second miss of the Tianqin clan slowly stroked the strings of the zither with her soft, jade-like hands. She murmured, "Although this zither is made from a fabric of the zither of the demonic cry and is only made from a few precious materials, it still contains the saint energy of the heavenly enchantress, so it is rather extraordinary when played. The music is moving, as if it could draw people's hearts." The zither saint? The heavenly enchantress? Jinshin was puzzled. He asked, "Miss, may I ask who the heavenly enchantress is?" The second miss of the Tianqin clan glanced at Jinshin strangely before seeming to think of something. A sliver of understanding appeared on her face before a sliver of admiration appeared on her face. She gently said, "Young Master Jinshin comes from a distant kingdom, so you obviously don't know about the heavenly enchantress. The heavenly enchantress is extremely famous in our region. With just her zither of the demonic cry, she can make the peak experts of many kingdoms on the Tianyuan continent pale. The heavenly enchantress uses the sound of the zither to injure her enemies, making it impossible to defend against. No one can last long under the effects of the zither. All the people who clash with her will either lose themselves in the sound of the zither or have their souls directly obliterated by the sound. They will die without a trace. The heavenly enchantress way of a zither has already reached the peak of perfection. Her music can cause the weather to change. It's said that several decades ago, in order to stop a war between two countries, the heavenly enchantress played a song in the air above the battlefield. In just a few seconds, over 1 million soldiers fell unconscious, and they only woke up after 3 days and 3 nights. The second miss of the Tianqin clan admired the heavenly enchantress very much. Her eyes shone with a strange light as soon as she mentioned the heavenly enchantress. Over 1 million soldiers fell asleep for 3 days and 3 nights with a single song. The heavenly enchantress music is just too powerful. Jianshin could not help but feel shocked by the power of the heavenly enchantress music. Every single song the heavenly enchantress plays is unparalleled. "It's an immortal song," said the second miss of the Tianqin clan. She had loved the 4 arts since she was young, so the heavenly enchantress had become her goal long ago. "Oh, the heavenly enchantress music is actually so wondrous. If there's an opportunity, I would like to see it for myself," said Jinshin. "The heavenly enchantress has already become a saint ruler. How could she be so easy to see?" The second miss of the Tianqin clan murmured. Afterward, her eyes shone, and she said, "Young Master Jianshan, I heard you're going to participate in the mercenary gathering this time." Jianshan sat down on a stool in the pavilion and replied, "That's right. I am indeed going to participate in the mercenary gathering. I may not have seen the mercenary gathering, but I've heard that it's extremely dangerous. Less than 1/10 of the people who participate in the mercenary gathering will survive. Even Earth Saint Masters may not necessarily survive. Young Master Jianshan, you must be careful," said the second miss of the Tianqin clan softly. "Thank you for your advice, second miss. I will be careful." After casually chatting with the second miss of the Tianqin clan, Jianshan left and made his way to the practice field. The practice field of the Tianqin clan was a ring with a circumference of 60 meters. When Jianshan arrived, the half-naked Qin Xiao just happened to jump off the ring. In the ring, the 5 captains of the guard were lying there with pale faces. Qin Xiao took a towel from a guard and wiped the sweat from his forehead. He smiled at Jianshan. "Brother Jianshan, why have you come here? Are you itching to spar with me?" Jianshan arrived before Qin Xiao and smiled. "Brother Qin Xiao, I've come this time to ask when we'll be leaving for Mercenary City." "No rush. No rush. There's still over 3 months until the mercenary gathering. We'll have to wait at least half a month before leaving, said Qin Shao. With that, Jianshan hesitated slightly before replying. Brother Qin Shao, I have some matters to attend to and need to leave for a period of time. However, I'll definitely be back within half a month. Jianshan's strength had already reached the peak of Great Saint Master. There would definitely be quite a few Earth Saint Master geniuses among his opponents in the mercenary gathering this time. So before he left for Mercenary City, Jianshan wanted to break through to the Earth Saint Master level. That way, his chances of success in the mercenary gathering would be much greater. Qin Shao did not ask Jianshan what he was going to do. He only warned Jianshan not to miss the time. Afterward, Jianshan left the Tianqin clan by himself. Riding a mount, he rushed out of Walorant City. Jianshan has left the clan. It looks like he's going on a long journey. Go inform Elder Wu. One of the 2 guards immediately ran into the Tianqin clan. Within an independent courtyard of the Tianqin clan, Elder Wu and an old man around his age sat at a table in the courtyard, leisurely playing chess. Elder Wu, this subordinate has something to report. Suddenly, a guard came directly to the entrance of the small courtyard and spoke to Elder Wu, who was inside. Elder Wu frowned slightly when he heard that. He glanced at the guard with some displeasure and scolded. Don't you know that it's forbidden to be disturbed when I'm playing chess? Elder Wu's voice contained some anger. Elder Wu, this matter was personally ordered by you. It's a special matter, so I have to report it to you no matter what, the guard followed up. Elder Wu's heart skipped a beat when he heard that. He said, come with me. With that, Elder Wu stood up and walked into the room. Old Wu, what's so important? Can't you finish the game first? The old man who was playing chess with Elder Wu grumbled. Old he, I have something important to do. Let's put this game on hold for now, Elder Wu said without even looking back as he led the guard into the room. Elder Wu closed the door and turned to look at the guard. The guard was smart as well. Without Elder Wu asking, he took the initiative to speak. Elder Wu, Jianshan has just left the Tianqin clan. It looks like he's going on a long journey. A gleam of light flashed through Elder Wu's eyes. Which direction did he go? Chapter 281. Jianshan left Walorant City on his class 3 magical beast and headed east as the sun rose. He had already seen a map of the nearby region. 100 kilometers to the east of Walorant City was a small mountain range. That was his destination. Jianshan had already read many of the experiences left behind by his predecessors in Chanyang Prefecture's library and Kargath Academy's library. He had already memorized the process. Although less than 1/10 of the people on the Tianyuan continent could successfully break through to Earth Saint Master, Jianshan had absolute confidence in himself. He believed that the hurdle of life and death from Great Saint Master to Earth Saint Master could not stop him. If he did not even have the courage to break through the first hurdle of breaking through to Earth Saint Master, then how would he face the more difficult bottlenecks in the future? Passing through the plains outside of Walorant City, Jianshan arrived in a small forest. The Class 3 magical beast ran like the wind in the small forest. The whistling of the wind blew past his ears, greatly affecting his hearing. Just as Jianshan passed under a large tree, an intense sword chi emitting a resplendent light broke through the dense foliage and shot toward Jianshan like lightning. Jianshan immediately dismounted and dodged to the side. With a miserable shriek, the Class 4 magical beast was cut in 2 by the sword chi. Bright red blood spurted out and dyed the grass on the ground red. Powerful saint force surged from Jianshan's right hand and quickly condensed into a silver-white longsword. With a wave of his hand, a sharp sword chi shot out from the sword and streaked through the air, shooting toward the lush foliage. The lush foliage shook and Jianshan's sword chi dissipated. Following that, a gray-clothed figure shot out from the lush foliage. A powerful aura covered the sky and fiercely pressed down on Jianshan's body. A large sword as wide as a palm emitted a dazzling golden light as it slashed toward Jianshan. Earth Saint Master, Jianshan cried out in his heart. His face became serious, and he didn't dare to be careless. With a thought, a faint purple and green light emerged from the light wind sword and fiercely slashed at the incoming greatsword. Ding! Sparks flew as the two saint weapons collided in midair. The purple and green sword chi from the light wind sword had directly cut a hole in the giant's sword. The gray-robed man let out a muffled groan as he staggered a few steps back. His sacred weapon had been damaged, and he had also been implicated. Jinshin also staggered back a few steps. He was now a peak great saint master, and his strength had increased by a lot. He was no longer in such a difficult situation when facing an Earth Saint Master. Even so, his arms still felt numb from the exchange with a gray-clothed man. Jinshin raised his head to look. When he saw the face of the gray-robed man, his face immediately turned cold. He said in a deep voice, "Elder Wu, it's actually you." The person who had suddenly attacked Jinshin was Elder Wu of the Tianqin clan. Elder Wu's eyes were filled with disbelief as he looked at the hole in his sacred weapon. "How is this possible? With your strength, how is it possible for you to destroy my sacred weapon?" Elder Wu looked at Jinshin with a face full of shock. Jinshin coldly smiled at Elder Wu's shocked expression and said, "Elder Wu, it seems that you still can't forget about the 5-colored stone in my hand." Hearing the 5-colored stone, Elder Wu's face revealed a look of understanding. Soon after, his face revealed an unconcealable joy as he said, "Yes, it must be the 5-colored stone. The 5-colored stone is a priceless treasure with great power. The only reason you were able to destroy my sacred weapon was because of the 5-colored stone." Thinking up to this point, Elder Wu's heart immediately calmed down. His face sank as he coldly stared at Jinshin and sternly said, "Jinshin, I'll give you 2 choices. The first is to leave the 5-colored stone behind, and I'll spare your life. The second is to kill you and take the 5-colored stone from your body. Make your choice." Jinshin coldly smiled. He was too lazy to explain Elder Wu's misunderstanding. He stared at Elder Wu with a mocking gaze and said, "Elder Wu, are you sure you can defeat me?" Elder Wu coldly snorted and said, "Jinshin, don't think that you can fight an Earth Saint Master just because you have a priceless treasure. The difference between an Earth Saint Master and a Great Saint Master is like a chasm. It's not something that can be made up for by any treasure." Although he said this, there was still a trace of fear in the depths of Elder Wu's eyes. "Is that so?" Jinshin coldly smiled and said, "Today, I'll let you see how a Great Saint Master kills an Earth Saint Master. The chasm between Great Saint Master and Earth Saint Master is destined to be broken by me." With that, Jinshin charged toward Elder Wu. "I'm arrogant. I don't believe that I can't stop you with my strength as a 3rd cycle Earth Saint Master." Elder Wu angrily roared as a strong saint force wrapped around his greatsword. With a whistling sound, he slashed it at Jinshin. The purple and green sword chi on Jinshin's light wind sword became even more intense as it met Elder Wu's saint weapon head-on. Elder Wu knew that Jinshin's saint weapon was powerful and could not touch it. Thus, he forcefully changed the trajectory of his greatsword to avoid Jinshin's light wind sword and aimed it at his chest. Jinshin coldly smiled. The light wind sword in his hand was like a nimble viper. With a sudden twist in the air, it actually took the initiative to chase after Elder Wu's saint weapon. Jinshin clearly understood that Earth Saint Masters were not so easy to kill. If his attack had been aimed at Elder Wu, he would have definitely been able to dodge it. However, if he had struck the saint weapon in Elder Wu's hand, he would definitely have been heavily injured. Jinshin's sword was extremely fast. Even if Elder Wu wanted to control his saint weapon to dodge, it was already too late. In the end, the sharp tip of the light wind sword pierced through the greatsword. Ding! With the sound of metal clashing against metal, Elder Wu's palm-sized greatsword was pierced through by the light wind sword. With his saint weapon damaged, Elder Wu's face paled as he spat out a mouthful of blood. Elder Wu withdrew his light wind sword and immediately retreated to create some distance between himself and Jinshin. His eyes were filled with fear as he stared at the greatsword in Jinshin's hand. He cried out in alarm. "I never thought that a peerless treasure would be so powerful. It was actually obtained by a mere Great Saint Master. It can even threaten an Earth Saint Master's life." Although his injuries were not light, Elder Wu did not have the slightest intention of retreating. Instead, his desire to steal the treasure grew even stronger. Jinshin's body slightly swayed, leaving behind an afterimage as he rushed towards Elder Wu with a speed that was hard to see with the naked eye. Elder Wu's face became stern. He did not even have the time to wipe away the blood at the corner of his mouth before he began fighting Jinshin. However, after suffering twice, Elder Wu was now extremely fearful of Jinshin's sword. He did not dare to touch it at all. He could only use his strength, but he was unable to use it completely. He fought in a rather sullen manner. However, Jinshin did not have the slightest fear. The light wind sword turned into a hazy sword shadow as it pierced towards Elder Wu again and again. In the end, the speed of the sword was so fast that it formed layers upon layers of sword shadows that surrounded Elder Wu. Although Elder Wu was an expert in Earth Saint Force and had already condensed a layer of armor around his body, this layer of armor was like a decoration in front of the sword spirits that could even destroy saint weapons. It was unable to provide any protection for Elder Wu. At this time, Elder Wu was unable to dodge in time, and the light wind sword cut into his arm. A trace of purple and green sword chi entered his arm and rushed towards Elder Wu's 5 viscera and 6 bowels. Elder Wu couldn't help but cry out in pain. Jinshin took advantage of this rare opportunity, and the light wind sword turned into a silver ray of light as it slashed towards Elder Wu's neck. Elder Wu's head flew high into the air with a pillar of blood. Elder Wu's head had been cut off by Jinshin's sword, and he died with his eyes wide open. Even in death, he still could not believe that a third cycle Earth Saint Master like him would actually die at the hands of a great Saint Master brat. Jinshin let out a long breath. Elder Wu was truly worthy of being a third cycle Earth Saint Master. He was truly difficult to deal with. His strength was much stronger than the old patriarch of the Xia clan. Jinshin arrived in front of Elder Wu's corpse and took off the spatial ring on his finger. After a slight hesitation, he dug a hole and buried Elder Wu's body. This place was too close to Walrant City. If Elder Wu's body was left here, it would be quickly discovered by the Tianqing clan. At that time, he would be in big trouble. After burying Elder Wu's body, Jinshin cleaned up the battlefield and covered up all traces of Elder Wu before finally leaving. 2 hours later, Jinshin arrived at a small mountain range and finally sat down on a large rock in front of a waterfall. After calming his heart, he took out 2 Class 4 monster cores and entered into a state of cultivation. There were no magical beasts in this small mountain range. Even wild beasts rarely appeared, so normally no one would set foot here. Jinshin was very relaxed when cultivating here. The energy from the monster cores continuously flowed into Jinshin's body. The moment the energy from the monster cores entered Jinshin's body, it was as if there was a mysterious force pulling them out of the monster cores and into the sword spirits. The energy was continuously absorbed by the miniature version of the light wind sword in Jinshin's dantian. The light wind sword's light became more and more intense, illuminating the entire dantian. Jinshin had already memorized the process of breaking through from a great Saint Master to an Earth Saint Master, so it was a walk in the park for him. Chapter 282. The transformation of a saint weapon seemed very simple, but every process was extremely difficult. If one didn't control it well, the saint weapon fragment would completely dissipate in the body, and that person would be reduced to a cripple. And some people who were in a more serious situation would die in the process of exploding their saint weapon. It was this seemingly simple process that blocked the path of many people who had reached the peak of Great Saint Master on the Tian Yuan continent. At the same time, many people ended their lives at this step. Less than 1/10 of the people who could successfully break through from Great Saint Master to Earth Saint Master. However, all those who could break through were outstanding cultivators who possessed extremely great talent. The energy within the monster cores was constantly absorbed by Jinshin. In the end, all of it gathered in the saint weapon in his dantian. After absorbing so much energy, the saint weapon in Jinshin's dantian became extremely unstable. Powerful ripples of energy radiated from the Saint weapon, making it difficult for Jianshun to control. It was like a powerful elephant struggling to break free from its shackles. A day passed. Jianshun sat on a large rock in front of the waterfall and absorbed over 20 Class 4 monster cores. The Saint weapon in his dantian had reached its limit long ago and was about to explode from the surging energy. Jianshun's body had also reached its limit. The surging energy that exceeded his limit had gathered in his body. The tremendous pressure caused all the pores on his body to bleed. Even his organs were enduring an extremely great pressure. The monster core in Jianshun's hand was sucked dry once again. This time, he directly pulled out a Class 5 monster core the size of a child's fist from a space ring. The energy within a Class 5 monster core was far more powerful and pure than a Class 4 monster core. As soon as the energy from the Class 5 monster core entered Jianshun's dantian, the Saint weapon in his dantian finally reached its limit. It was forcefully blown apart by the powerful energy, turning into countless tiny fragments that drifted into Jianshun's dantian. The energy ripples from the Saint weapon's destruction spread out from Jianshun's dantian, viciously attacking his organs, meridians, and countless other organs. It was as if a bomb had exploded in his body. Jianshun grunted and spat out a mouthful of blood. He had also been greatly affected by the destruction of his Saint weapon. The energy ripples from the destruction of his Saint weapon had also heavily injured him. The pain from his body had already numbed Jianshun's entire body, as if he had lost control of his body. His head also became a little dizzy, as if he could not endure it any longer, and fainted. This step had ended the lives of many people who had broken through from Great Saint Master to Earth Saint Master. Jianshun clenched his teeth, doing his best to keep himself awake. He could feel the energy within the Saint weapon's fragments rapidly flowing away. Jianshun's heart immediately tightened. Without any hesitation, he divinized his consciousness and connected it with the countless tiny fragments of the Saint weapon. Afterwards, he immediately began to absorb the energy from the Class 5 monster core into the countless fragments of the Saint weapon, replenishing the energy that was constantly flowing away. Jianshun had already made it through the hurdle of life and death. The next step was the most crucial one. The energy fragments from the Saint weapon's destruction would only remain in the body temporarily and would not last forever. The energy within them would rapidly flow away at every moment. The moment the energy completely dissipated, the cultivator would become a complete cripple. Pure and powerful energy surged out from the Class 5 monster core. After entering Jianshun's body, it immediately split into countless strands of energy that flowed into every fragment of the Saint weapon. With the support of this energy, not only was the Saint weapon's energy continuously flowing away replenished, there was even excess energy that was being refined into every fragment of the Saint weapon. Not only did the Saint weapon's energy become even more powerful, it was also slowly undergoing a qualitative change. Reaching this step required an extremely large amount of energy. The speed at which Jianshun absorbed the energy from the Class 5 monster core had already reached the limit. The surging energy within a monster core entered Jianshun's body through his pores, gathering in his dantian. In just half a day's time, the energy within the Class 5 monster core had been completely absorbed by Jianshun. Afterward, Jianshun took out another 2 Class 5 monster cores from his space ring and continued to absorb the energy within them. The Saint weapon's fragments in Jianshun's dantian emitted a weak glow that drifted through Jianshun's dantian. They flickered like stars, as if they were bottomless pits. Even after absorbing such a large amount of energy, they still had not reached a state of saturation. However, the flickering light was constantly growing stronger. Breaking through to Earth Saint Master was extremely difficult and troublesome. It was far from being as easy as Jianshun's breakthroughs in the past. Every single process required precise control. Not even the slightest accident could occur, or all of his previous efforts would be wasted. After 3 days, Jianshun had already used up 10 Class 5 monster cores. Now, every single Saint weapon's fragment in his dantian contained a large amount of energy. They had already reached a state of saturation, and the energy had undergone a qualitative change. They shone with a resplendent light like stars, densely packed together, as if they were transforming Jinshin's dantian into a vast starry sky. With a thought, Jinshin's consciousness split into thousands of fragments, controlling the countless Saint Weapons fragments to reform once more. At the same time, the two Class 5 monster cores in his hands continuously emitted energy into Jinshin's body. With his dantian as the cauldron and the energy as the fire, he carried out the final refinement of the fragments. Crack! A crack suddenly appeared on the surface of Jinshin's body. Soon after, cracks began to appear all over his body. The cracks rapidly expanded, quickly spreading to his entire body. Finally, at a speed visible to the naked eye, Jinshin's body began to wither and fall off. Jinshin was on the verge of breaking through to Earth Saint Master. His body was also undergoing a qualitative change. The difference between Earth Saint Master and Great Saint Master was a qualitative change. Not only did it increase one's strength, but it also caused one's body to undergo a metamorphosis, becoming much stronger than before. As the old skin fell off, Jinshin's new skin was revealed. It was as white as a baby's skin, with a faint light flowing on its surface. 3 hours later, Jinshin's body had finished its metamorphosis. The Saint Weapon in his body had also been completely condensed. The miniature light wind sword was still in its original state, quietly floating in Jinshin's dantian. It didn't seem to have changed in the slightest, but the energy within it was now 10 times stronger than before. This wasn't just an increase in quantity, but a qualitative change as well. If the light wind sword in the past was a vat of water, then the current light wind sword was a vast ocean. If the previous light wind sword was like a small flame that could burn paper, then the current light wind sword was like a raging flame that could easily melt steel. The two were not even on the same level. There was no way to compare them. Jinshin didn't stop there. The energy within his body continued to flow in all directions, merging into his flesh, blood, organs, meridians, and other organs. His body was once again being refined. The previous metamorphosis of his body was only a result of breaking through to Earth Saint Master. But now, Jinshin's body was being refined according to the body refining chapter of the Azulite Sword Manual. Chapter 283. The surging saint force that was more than 10 times stronger than before spread throughout every inch of Jinshin's body, slowly fusing with his skin and organs. Jinshin was completely using energy to temper his body and not various exercises to strengthen his body. If he were to use some exercises to strengthen his body, it would gradually change shape, breaking away from its natural shape and becoming tall and sturdy. In Jinshin's opinion, this method of tempering was completely suppressing the functions of his body. Although it could strengthen his body to a certain extent, it was not suitable for him. No swordsman had the back of a tiger or the waist of a bear. To a swordsman, it was necessary to maintain a slender figure. That way, they would be able to display their speed and react in the shortest amount of time with the least amount of energy. The body tempering technique recorded in the Azulite Sword Codex was without a doubt tailor-made for swordsmen. Not only could the body tempering technique strengthen one's body without changing its shape, it was a unique method of using energy to strengthen the body. It could strengthen a person's body without limit. As long as the energy in the body continued to increase, the body would continue to strengthen. Layer after layer of light from the flow of energy flashed on Jinshin's skin. When the pure energy that had undergone a qualitative transformation fused with Jinshin's body, his flesh and blood immediately began to strengthen at an unbelievable rate. The energy within the Class 5 monster cores continuously supplied Jinshin's energy to strengthen his body. Strengthening the body required an extremely large amount of energy, but Jinshin had a large number of monster cores, so he obviously did not need to worry about energy. The awkward situation he had encountered in the Changyang Prefecture when he was young would not happen to him again. The time needed to strengthen his body was even longer than when Jinshin broke through. After 7 days and over 20 Class 5 monster cores, Jianshan finally reached the limit of his body. If he wanted to strengthen his body again, Jianshan could only strengthen the saint force in his body. Jianshan finally opened his eyes slowly as he sat on the boulder. As his consciousness returned to reality, the deafening sound of the waterfall immediately rang out. It was like the roar of a wild beast. Jianshan sensed the saint force in his body that had undergone a qualitative change. He could not help but smile in joy and excitement. Now, he had finally become an Earth Saint Master. Even on the Tianyuan continent, he could be regarded as an expert who could hold his own. Now that my body has undergone a transformation and has been tempered with saint force, its strength and flexibility have increased by tens of times. I'm afraid that even a saint weapon would not be able to harm me. Jianshan muttered to himself as he massaged his body. His face was filled with joy from the great increase in strength. Jianshan opened his palm, and a surge of saint force began to gather in his right hand. It quickly condensed into a silver-white light wind sword. As soon as the light wind sword appeared in Jianshan's hand, it emitted a biting, cold aura. It was even sharper than before. Right now, the light wind sword looked exactly the same as before. The only difference was that the light wind sword looked even brighter, as if it was emitting a layer of white light. The blade of the light wind sword was like a mirror that could clearly reflect the surrounding scenery. Suddenly, Jianshan's right hand shook, and the light wind sword began to vibrate violently. It let out a light sword hum, and with the light wind sword as the center, a faint white light spread out in all directions. The weeds on the ground were instantly turned into dust by the white light, as if they had been sliced into countless tiny pieces. Jianshan's eyes suddenly became sharp, and his body suddenly flickered, turning into a series of afterimages that were hard to follow with the naked eye. Following the sound of the air being torn apart, the light wind sword in his hand had already turned into a dense array of afterimages. The speed at which he appeared was so fast that he left behind afterimages that overlapped with each other, covering every inch of the space around him. Jianshan's quick movements created an invisible wind that spun around the area. Gradually, the wind became stronger and stronger, causing the leaves and grass on the ground to be blown up into the air. The light wind sword let out a clear hum as the dense array of sword shadows covered the sky, piercing through the countless leaves that were blown away by the wind. After this scene continued for a while, Jianshan's movements came to an abrupt stop. Because of his quick movements, the wind that he created slowly dissipated. The leaves and grass that filled the sky also lost their support and slowly drifted to the ground. If one were to look carefully, it would not be hard to see that among the leaves, there was a large sword character written on each leaf. The characters were all different in size, but they just so happened to cover the entire area of the leaves. The strength of each character was finally controlled. Not only was the writing clear, but the leaves were not damaged in the slightest. After breaking through to the Earth Saint Master realm, Jianshan's sword speed had become much faster than before. When he was still a great Saint Master, his sword speed could only threaten a great Saint Master. In front of an Earth Saint Master, he did not have the slightest advantage. He could only rely on the Azure and Violet Sword Chi to fight against an Earth Saint Master. But now that he had become an Earth Saint Master, even if he did not use the Azure and Violet Sword Chi, an Earth Saint Master would not be able to give him the slightest pressure. Looking at the leaves on the ground, a satisfied smile appeared on Jianshan's face. Sheathing the light wind sword, he took off his clothes and jumped into the pool below the waterfall. After a comfortable bath, he changed into a clean set of clothes and left without any reluctance. Half a day later, Jianshan returned to the Tianqin family in Walorant City. Just as he stepped through the door, Qin Xiao and Ming Dong, who had received the news ahead of time, quickly walked over from afar. "Brother Jianshan, you're finally back. You disappeared for 10 days, making me worry for a long time. I was afraid that you wouldn't be able to make it back in time and would miss the mercenary gathering." Qin Xiao laughed loudly from afar. "Jianshan, why did you leave without a word and leave me here alone?" Ming Dong angrily stared at Jianshan, his voice full of resentment. Jinshan's gaze paused on Ming Dong for a while. Then he chuckled. Ming Dong, your talent is not bad. You actually broke through to the Great Saint Master realm so quickly. You came a few days earlier than I expected. Chapter 284. The power went out for an entire day, making it impossible for him to write during the day. The power only came back at night, and when he wrote in the middle of the night, there was thunder and rain. He didn't dare to continue writing, so he immediately shut down his computer. Suddenly, Qin Xiao made a sound of surprise. He stared at Jianshan with a strange gaze, looking him up and down. In the end, he circled around Jianshan a few times and said with a face full of doubt, Brother Jianshan, you've been gone for 10 days. Why do I feel like you've suddenly become a little different from before? Ming Dong nodded in agreement, and here I thought I was the only one who felt this. So Brother Qin Xiao has also noticed that Jianshan is a little different from before. Hearing the two's words, Jianshan's heart skipped a beat. If Qin Xiao was the only one who said this, he could treat it as a joke and laugh it off. But now that even Qin Xiao felt the same way, there was clearly some truth to it. Could it be that my breakthrough to the Earth Saint Master level has changed so much that even the two of them can sense it? Jianshan thought to himself. At this moment, Qin Xiao seemed to think of something and revealed a meaningful smile. He said in a low voice, Brother Jianshan, you haven't run off to some place to be with some girl, have you? I've heard that some people undergo very obvious changes after experiencing certain things. Qin Xiao's face was covered in a mischievous smile. Jianshan's face darkened. He unhappily glared at Qin Xiao. Qin Xiao, stop talking nonsense. Qin Xiao stared at Jianshan with a strange expression and laughed mischievously. Brother Jianshan, looking at your flustered and exasperated appearance, I wouldn't have guessed right, would I? Jianshan was immediately speechless. Qin Xiao looked like a burly man and seemed rather simple and honest, but he didn't think that he would be so good at teasing people. Jianshan looked seriously at Jianshan and said, Jianshan, I've indeed discovered that the current you seems to be different from before. Jianshan chuckled and said, Then tell me, how am I different now? Ming Dong carefully observed Jianshan, then imitated Qin Xiao and circled Jianshan a few times. In the end, he shook his head and said, I don't know, I can't say. Jianshan smiled and said, All right, let's not talk about this irrelevant topic for now. Brother Qin Xiao, when will we depart for Mercenary City? Has the date been set? Qin Xiao straightened up as soon as the topic was brought up. The date of departure has already been set. It'll be in 3 days. At that time, it won't be just my Tianqin clan. There will be a few other large clans and some powerful sects from the Zhuya kingdom as well. They'll all be directly transported through the spatial gates of our allies. Oh, so there will be quite a few people participating in the mercenary gathering, Jianshan murmured. Although there will probably be several hundred people going, only a few dozen of them will be participating in the gathering. The others will be escorting them along the way so that they won't encounter any accidents along the way, Qin Xiao said seriously. After learning the date of departure, Jianshan parted ways with Qin Xiao and returned to his room with Ming Dong. After closing the door, Ming Dong sat down on a chair and stared at Jianshan with some worry. Jianshan, the mercenary gathering will be taking place soon. It's extremely dangerous, and it's said that even Earth Saint Masters might not be able to survive. Are you really confident? Jianshan smiled. Ming Dong, don't worry. Since I'm willing to go, I obviously have a certain level of confidence. Even if I can't make it into the rankings, keeping my life won't be a problem. Jianshan's voice was filled with great confidence. Before, he was able to threaten Earth Saint Masters when he was still a Great Saint Master. Now that he had broken through again, there were very few Earth Saint Masters who could match him if he borrowed the Sword Spirit's invincibility. All right then, I wish you success. The mercenary gathering is not a place I can participate in. Although I've broken through to Great Saint Master, it's still far from enough to participate in the gathering, so I won't be interfering. I can only go with you to Mercenary City. Ming Dong knew himself very well. Even Earth Saint Masters might not be able to survive, so he would just be throwing his life away if he participated. Afterward, Ming Dong left Jianshan's room. Jianshun locked himself in his room by himself. He sat cross-legged on his bed, familiarizing himself with the power that had suddenly increased by many times. Suddenly, a series of knocks rang out in Jianshun's ears. He saw a middle-aged man in white robes slowly walk into Jianshun's room. It was actually the patriarch of the Tianqin family. Jianshun immediately got off his bed when he saw the person. He clasped his hands. Greetings to the patriarch of the Tianqin family. The patriarch of the Tianqin family walked in with a smile, but when his gaze landed on Jianshun, his face suddenly froze. A sliver of undetectable shock appeared in the depths of his eyes, but he returned to his senses very quickly. He could not help but sigh in amazement. No wonder Xiao admires brother Jianshun so much. So not only is your strength extraordinary, but your talent is also so terrifying. You don't seem to be more than 25 years old, but you've actually managed to break through to Earth Saint Master at such a young age. That's just too terrifying. Jianshun was not surprised at all. It was as if everything was only natural. After breaking through to Earth Saint Master, his body had undergone a metamorphosis, causing his bearing to change drastically as well. Ming Dong and Qin Xiao, who were more familiar with him, could clearly sense this change, let alone the knowledgeable patriarch of the Tianqin clan, Jingyang and Jingyang. You're too kind, patriarch. I was just lucky and happened to succeed. Jianshun declined with clasped hands. Brother Jianshun, you've only broken through to Earth's Saint Master recently. The metamorphosis of your body has caused you to give off a unique aura. Anyone with a bit of insight will be able to see through you. This won't do you any good when you participate in the mercenary gathering. With that, a small booklet appeared in the patriarch's hand. He continued, this is a method to hide your aura. Not only will you be able to hide your aura after breaking through to Earth Saint Master, but you'll also be able to completely hide your strength. You should have quite a few gang leaders when you go to Mercenary City. After all, every extra bit of strength you hide is an extra trump card for survival. As soon as he heard that it was a method to hide one's aura and strength, Jianshun's eyes immediately shone with excitement. After thanking the patriarch, he accepted the booklet without any hesitation. Brother Jianshun will set off in 3 days. I'll lend you this cultivation method for 3 days. Return it to me after 3 days, the patriarch of the Tianqin clan said with a smile. He was amiable and did not put on the airs of patriarch at all. Jianshun nodded. I'll definitely return this cultivation method to the patriarch in 3 days. The patriarch walked over to a chair and sat down. After a slight hesitation, he said to Jianshun, Jianshun, I've come this time because I have a request. I hope you can agree to it. With that, Jianshun looked at the patriarch in doubt. He asked, Patriarch, just tell me what it is. As long as it's within my power, I definitely won't refuse. The expression of the Tianqin clan's representative became somewhat solemn. There was a faint trace of worry between her brows. She said, this matter may not be difficult for you. If Xiao encounters any danger during the mercenary gathering, I hope that little brother can lend a hand and save her. Do your best to protect her life. Jianshun chuckled with that. Don't worry, patriarch. Brother Qin Xiao and I hit it off right from the start. Even if you didn't mention this matter, I would still help him. If that's the case, then I don't have to worry. Brother Jianshun, you should properly comprehend this aura-concealing cultivation method. I won't disturb you any further. The patriarch of the Tianqin family let out a sigh of relief. He did not stay there for long and quickly left. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. In the morning, Jianshun was woken up by Qin Xiao. He then went to the backyard of the Tianqin clan with Ming Dong. When Jianshun arrived, a large group of people had already gathered in the backyard. Half of them were old men in their 70s, people that Jianshun had never seen before. At the very front, 4 huge flying magical beasts sat on the ground quietly. They were all Class 3 magical beasts. Flying magical beasts were extremely precious and rare on the Tianyuan continent. They were far rarer than mounts. This was not only because flying magical beasts were difficult to capture, but also because flying magical beasts were not things that ordinary people dared to ride. Once a magical beast took to the air, your life would be completely in the hands of the magical beast. If it suddenly went berserk and threw you from several thousand meters in the air, even Earth's Saint Masters would fall to their deaths. Chapter 285. Are we going to ride a flying magical beast? I've never ridden a flying magical beast before. Ming Dong became rather excited as he looked at the four-legged flying magical beast. However, in the blink of an eye, he became slightly worried. He murmured, I heard that flying magical beasts often go berserk and lose control. They're much wilder than magical beasts that run on land. What if they throw us down from the sky? Won't all of us fall to our deaths? Nearby, a young man in azure robes looked at Ming Dong in disdain. He sneered, Humph, you're afraid of death. Since you're afraid to ride one, then don't. No one's forcing you. Ming Dong's face changed slightly when he heard that. He glared at the young man, but before he could say anything, the young man sneered again. What? Do you still want to lay your hands on me? Come on, hit me. The young man's tone was rather arrogant. He did not take Jianshan seriously at all, and he directly ignored him as well. The people in the surroundings watched on coldly. They had no intention of interfering. Jianshan's face became rather ugly as well. Even he could not stand the young man's arrogance. However, just when he was about to teach the young man a lesson, there was a flash. The burly Qin Shao suddenly appeared before the young man and slapped him viciously. He said angrily, Tianling, how dare you insult my friend? Are you asking for a beating? Qin Shao did not hold back. The young man fell to the ground from the slap, and the left side of his face immediately swelled up. Qin Shao didn't intend to let the youth named Tianling off so easily. He kicked Tianling's stomach, causing him to curl up. He said in a stern voice, Tianling, weren't you very arrogant a moment ago? You even dare to insult my brother. Why aren't you scolding him now? Tianling glanced at Qin Shao with some fear. He dare not say anything. Qin Shao possessed a special status in the Tianqin clan. He received the care and concern of many older people, and he was the son of the patriarch. It could be said that no one in the younger generation dared to provoke him. Enough, Qin Shao. No matter what, you and Tianling grew up together. How can you harm the harmony of your family for an outsider? Is an outsider more important than your brother and sister? A middle-aged man walked over and glared at Qin Shao. Afterwards, he glanced past Jianshan and Ming Dong, and an undetectable sliver of coldness flashed through his eyes. Uncle, as soon as Tianling saw the middle-aged man, he crawled up from the ground as if he had found a savior. He hid behind the middle-aged man as he glared at Jianshan and Ming Dong with eyes filled with fury and hatred like a wolf. Qin Shao was clearly afraid of the middle-aged man, but with his personality, he would not be afraid because of this. He said confidently, Uncle Tianzhou, what are you saying? Jianshan and Ming Dong are my brothers. They're not outsiders. I heard the cause of the matter clearly. Tianling was just looking for trouble, offending my brother of his own accord. He brought all of this on himself, so who can he blame? The middle-aged man snorted coldly and stopped arguing with Qin Shao. He glanced at Jianshan and Ming Dong coldly and said emotionlessly, We will be leaving the Zhuya kingdom on the clan's flying magical beast. Please return where you came from. The middle-aged man did not hold back at all, directly telling Jianshan and Ming Dong to leave. Jianshan and Ming Dong's expressions immediately became ugly when they heard that. The middle-aged man was clearly chasing them away as a host. Jianshan and Ming Dong had already stayed with the Tianqin clan for over 2 months. There was less than half a month until the mercenary festival. If they did not pass through a space gate in such a short amount of time, they would not be able to make it to Mercenary City, which was several 100,000 kilometers away. The middle-aged man's words infuriated Qin Shao. He suddenly strode forward and glared at the middle-aged man. He yelled out, Uncle Tianzhou, what are you trying to say? Jianshan and Ming Dong have been invited by our Tianqin clan to come to Mercenary City with us. They are our esteemed guests. How can you treat our esteemed guests like this? Esteemed guests. The middle-aged man smiled disdainfully. Are the two of them even worthy of being esteemed guests of our Tianqin clan? Nephew Qin Shao, it's best if you don't bring those dubious people back in the future. Our Tianqing clan is the greatest clan in Walnut City, not some small clan. How can we just let some random people in?" Afterwards, the middle-aged man looked at Jianshun and Ming Dong. "If you know what's good for you, leave quickly. This is not a place where the two of you can stay." "Uncle Tianzhou, since you say that my friends are dubious, are the three people behind you noble as well? According to what you said, aren't you still bringing a bunch of random people into my Tianqing clan?" Qin Shao retorted rudely. If anyone else dared to talk back to him like that, he would have rushed up and beaten them up long ago. However, the middle-aged man before him was not someone he could deal with, so he could only hold back his anger. The middle-aged man's face sank. "Humph. The three brothers behind me are the pillars of my mercenary group. They've been with me for over 20 years, and they've gone through many life-or-death situations with me. They've climbed out of piles of corpses countless times with me. We've already become best friends. How can the people you casually bring back compare to them?" With that, the middle-aged man looked at Jianshun and Ming Dong and said with a deep voice, "You're actually still not leaving? Do you want me to make you leave by force?" A few people in the surroundings watched this scene coldly. No one said anything. Jianshun had kept a very low profile in the Tianqing clan. Apart from Qin Shao, he had no connections with anyone else. Jianshun's face became rather sunken. He said disdainfully, "If the patriarch of the Tianqing clan wants me to leave, I definitely won't stay for a moment longer. But who are you? Can you represent the patriarch of the Tianqing clan? What right do you have to make me leave? How dare you speak to me like that? You're looking to die." The middle-aged man was furious. Saint Force surged in his right hand as a fiery red machete quickly condensed. With the appearance of the machete, the surrounding temperature immediately began to climb. "Stop!" Just when the middle-aged man was about to attack Jianshun, a dignified voice rang out from afar. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and saw a large group of people walk over from afar. The violet-robed person at the front was the patriarch of the Tianqing clan. Seeing the patriarch of the Tianqing clan arrive, the middle-aged man slowly put away his saint weapon. He stared coldly at Jianshun like a venomous snake. "Humph, I'll let you off today. Leave my Tianqing clan immediately." Jianshun's gaze became slightly cold. A sliver of killing intent flashed through his eyes, but he soon sneered disdainfully. He already knew that the middle-aged man was an Earth Saint Master and possessed fire-attributed Saint Force. He possessed a natural advantage in terms of attack power, but Jianshun did not take him seriously at all. Ming Dong, on the other hand, was furious. Clearly, he had been quite infuriated by the middle-aged man's words. Qin Zhao's expression was rather ugly as well. After understanding the situation from Qin Shao, the patriarch of the Tianqing clan's face immediately sank. He turned to the middle-aged man and said, "Tianzhou, little brother Jianshun is an esteemed guest of our Tianqing clan. How can you be so rude?" The middle-aged man called Tianzhou snorted coldly in disdain. He glanced at Jianshun and Ming Dong and said, "Big brother Qin, when did you learn from nephew Qin Shao? Treating two juniors as esteemed guests? Think about how my Tianqing clan has a transcendent status in Walnut City, and big brother Tianming is the city lord of Walnut City. How can such an illustrious clan allow just anyone to enter? What's even more outrageous is that my Tianqing clan actually wants to bring these two people to Mercenary City through a space gate. Big brother Qin, don't you know the expensive price of using a space gate?" "Shut up." The patriarch of the Tianqing clan became extremely stern. "Tianzhou, how can you say something like that? Looks like you've become more and more narrow-minded after all these years in the delivery business. Little brother Jianshun is an esteemed guest of my Tianqing clan. He should be treated as such. How can I allow you to sully him like that? Why don't you apologize to little brother Jianshun?" The patriarch of the Tianqing clan was furious. "Humph. Like father, like son. You want me to apologize to a junior? That's just wishful thinking." Tianzhou was extremely arrogant, as if he was the supreme patriarch of the clan. He did not give any face to the patriarch of the Tianqing clan at all. With that, Tianzhou leapt up and directly landed on the back of a flying magical beast, where he sat down. Afterwards, the three middle-aged men behind him also leapt onto the back of the same flying magical beast, closing their eyes to rest. Seeing how arrogant Tianzhou was, the patriarch of the Tianqin clan's expression became extremely ugly. His chest heaved violently. Clearly, he was quite angry as well. Qin Shao arrived before Jianshan and said softly, "This person is my uncle, Tianzhou. He's from the Tian bloodline and has a very high status in the Tianqin clan, almost comparable to my father. He spends most of his time wandering the Tian Yuan continent and only returned 2 days ago. It seems like he has a very bad opinion of you. You must be more careful in the future. He's an Earth Saint Master." Jianshan nodded slightly and softly said, "I will be careful." At this moment, an old man in black robes descended from the sky. In the end, he hovered 10 meters above the ground. His indifferent gaze slowly swept past the people below. "Greetings to the great elder." Everyone, including the patriarch of the Tianqin clan, bowed when they saw the old man. Even Zhou Tian on the flying magical beast immediately stood up and respectfully bowed to the old man. "A Heaven Saint Master." Jinshan's eyes suddenly narrowed when he saw the old man hovering in the air. The Tianqin clan actually had a peak expert like a Heaven Saint Master. The old man indifferently glanced past the patriarch of the Tianqin clan and Zhou Tian before looking at Qin Shao. He could not help but smile kindly. However, when his gaze landed on Jianshan, a gleam of light flashed through his eyes. A sliver of undetectable shock and disbelief appeared in the depths of his eyes, but it only lasted for a moment. The old man gently sighed. His gaze immediately became rather complicated. There was regret, relief, and a sliver of anticipation. It was very difficult to understand. "Tianzhou, Qin Yisheng," the old man slowly said. "What orders does the great elder have?" The patriarch of the Tianqin clan and Zhou Tian asked in unison. "The two of you should be extremely clear about the first rule of the Tianqin clan. If the relationship between the two clans is fractured because of you, then just wait for the harshest punishment," the old man said emotionlessly. His voice was extremely calm, but even so, the patriarch of the Tianqin clan and Zhou Tian's heart still trembled when they heard it. "Don't worry, great elder. We will definitely abide by the rules of the ancestors. We will definitely properly protect the relationship between the two clans," the patriarch said. Tianzhou immediately bowed as well. "Tianzhou will abide by the rules of the ancestors. We will definitely properly protect the relationship between the two clans." "Yes." The old man slowly nodded. "Is everyone here?" "Great elder, everyone is here," the patriarch of the Tianqin clan said in a hurry. "Then let's go." Afterward, everyone leapt onto the backs of the magical beasts. 10 people sat on each magical beast, making it a total of 40 people. Jianshan, Mingdong, and Qin Shao all sat on the same magical beast. They were surrounded by 7 people, clearly protecting them. Chapter 286. The flying magical beast flew at high speeds, several thousand meters above the ground. Its speed grew faster and faster. The great elder of the Tianqin clan flew at the front, protecting everyone. At the same time, he prevented the flying magical beast from suddenly going berserk and throwing everyone down from the sky. Although this was a rare occurrence, there were quite a few geniuses of the Tianqin clan who were going this time. They were all the future pillars of the Tianqin clan. Not a single accident could happen to them. Sitting on the back of the flying magical beast, Jinshan's expression became complicated. He could not help but think of the time when he was forced to leave home by the Huayan sect. At that time, it was Changbo who had sent him away from Lore City on the flying magical beast. Then, he thought of his graceful mother, Bai Yuntan, his lively sister, Changyang Mingyue, his burly and straightforward big brother from Changyang Prefecture, as well as the dignified patriarch of the clan, Changyang Ba. All of these people who had cared for Jinshan could not help but appear in Jinshan's mind. Among them were fragments of memories of his life in Changyang Prefecture. The Huayan sect. Jinshan tightly clenched his fists. He was completely forced to leave the kingdom of Jessen by the Huayun sect. It was a pity that the Huayun sect was just too powerful in the kingdom of Jessen. They had 2 peak heaven saint masters and many other saint masters, causing the imperial family of the kingdom of Jessen to fear them. It was not something that the Chanyang prefecture could contend against. Huayun sect, when I return, it will be the day that I, Jianshun, get my revenge. I was forced to wander outside by you all these years. I will definitely settle this debt with you. The coldness in Jianshun's eyes grew sharper and sharper, but he was an extremely rational person. Although he was already an Earth Saint Master, and there were very few Earth Saint Masters who could pose a threat to him with the help of the Azalate Sword Spirits, he was basically powerless against a Heaven Saint Master. Every major realm above Earth Saint Master was like a natural chasm. It was like the difference between heaven and earth. It was impossible to make up for it. The Saint Force of a Heaven Saint Master had reached an extremely terrifying level. It could support their bodies to fly thousands of meters in the air for long periods of time. Moreover, the Saint Force was endless. Unless an intense battle occurred, the Saint Force within a Heaven Saint Master would never run out. The flying magical beasts that Jianshun and the others rode flew at high speeds in the air. Fierce gusts of wind blew past their ears, causing thunderous booms that greatly affected their hearing. Along the way, there were constantly people riding magical beasts that encountered the group from the Tianqin clan. These people were all from the Zhuya kingdom. Every single group was protected by a Heaven Saint Master. These people all knew the great elders of the Tianqin clan, so they would greet each other in an extremely friendly manner as soon as they saw each other. Afterward, they would gather together and continue on their way. Not everyone who went to Mercenary City had a flying magical beast to ride on. On the ground, there were quite a few groups riding magical beasts. Each group was large in scale, with at least 100 people in each group. They kicked up clouds of yellow dust on the ground, forming huge yellow dragons that were several kilometers long. Half a day later, everyone left the Zhuya kingdom. After another day of flying, they finally arrived at a kingdom with a space gate. It was a kingdom called the Great Zhou Kingdom. I've heard my father say that the Great Zhou Kingdom once had a period of glory. Its strength was enough to rival the 3 great empires of the Tian-Yuan continent. The space gate was left behind by that extremely powerful protector, but ever since he left, the Great Zhou Kingdom gradually declined. It's now just a small, nameless kingdom, Qin Xiao explained as he watched the bustling cities recede below. Jianshun sighed inside. The deterrence of a peak expert was just too great. He never thought that an extremely powerful kingdom would gradually decline once they lost the existence of a peak expert. Although the Great Zhou Kingdom had declined, its territory was still not small. The flying magical beasts flew for more than half a day before finally approaching the imperial capital of the Great Zhou Kingdom. The region had gradually begun to bustle with activity. More and more flying magical beasts appeared in the air. Jianshun saw over a dozen peak Heaven Saint Masters just flying in the air. Other than that, there were a few Heaven Saint Masters who directly rode on the backs of flying magical beasts, making them difficult to discover. These people belonged to the various large organizations of the various kingdoms in the region. They all planned on using the space gate in the Great Zhou Kingdom to head to Mercenary City. Under the lead of the Great Elder, the group of people from the Tianqin clan flew all the way to the imperial palace of the Great Zhou Kingdom before descending. Immediately, a general wearing the uniform of the Kai clan came forward to receive them. He warmly greeted the Great Elder of the Tianqin clan before arranging for them to rest in a courtyard within the imperial palace. The space gate will open in 2 days. During these 2 days, all of you stay here and don't run around. This is the imperial palace of the Great Zhou Kingdom after all. If you cause any trouble, even the clan won't be able to protect you. The Great Elder of the Tianqin clan said to everyone before leaving. Zhou Tian coldly glanced at Jianshun before coldly snorting. He turned around and returned to his room. Although he really wanted to teach Jianshun a lesson, this was the imperial palace of the Great Zhou Kingdom after all. He did not dare to act recklessly. Qin Shao arrived before Jianshun and said with a slightly worried expression, Jianshun, Zhou Tian is also going to participate in the mercenary gathering. You have to be careful if you encounter him in the future. Jianshun faintly nodded and did not say anything. These 2 days were rather peaceful. The group of people from the Tianqin clan obediently stayed in the small courtyard arranged by the imperial palace. They did not take a single step out, afraid that they would cause any trouble. Although the great Zhou kingdom had gradually declined over the years, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. The current great Zhou kingdom was still very much feared by many of the surrounding kingdoms. 2 days later, the great elder of the Tianqin clan suddenly appeared and led everyone away. They passed through countless splendid palaces and pavilions before finally stopping in an open space. A large group of people had already gathered here. As far as the eye could see, there were at least 1,000 people completely surrounding the open space. Jianshun faintly raised his head. He could clearly see that there was a transparent energy barrier in front of him that was connected to the ground. The barrier was semicircular and covered a radius of 100 meters. Everyone was standing around the barrier. I heard that this barrier was left behind by the protector of the great Zhou kingdom in the past. It's extremely powerful, and no one has been able to break through it after so many years. It said that when the great Zhou kingdom was in chaos, a saint ruler snuck into the kingdom and attacked the barrier in an attempt to steal the space gate. It's a pity that he could only make the barrier shake a few times with his full strength. He was unable to break through it, so he had no choice but to retreat in the end. The protector of the great Zhou kingdom in the past was just too powerful. He stood at the apex of the Tian Yuan continent long ago. How could a regular saint ruler break through his barrier? I heard that the protector of the great Zhou kingdom had reached the peak long ago. He seemed to have disappeared in search of a final breakthrough. However, there hasn't been any news of him in several hundred years. Looks like he failed to break through to the final level. The peerless grand imperial protector of the great Zhou kingdom is no longer in this world. What a pity, what a pity, such a peerless expert has left just like that. A few of the old people in the surroundings stared at the transparent barrier with mixed feelings as they discussed. Many of them sighed emotionally while many of them looked at the barrier with respect. I wonder just how powerful the protector of the great Zhou kingdom was if even saint rulers can't break through the barrier. Jianshun softly murmured as he listened to the discussions of the people in the surroundings. Suddenly, there was a sudden silence. Some of the people who were whispering stopped talking at the same time. Then, 5 old men in white robes with white hair and youthful faces slowly floated down from the sky. Their otherworldly temperament made them seem like immortals from the heavens that had descended to the mortal world, surpassing the mortal world. The 5 old men hovered above the barrier in 5 different directions, forming a pentagram that surrounded the transparent barrier. At this moment, one of the old men clasped his hands in the surroundings and said, "Everyone, I never thought that we would meet again after 50 years. Next, the 5 of us will use a secret technique to temporarily close the barrier. Everyone can use a space gate to head to Mercenary City. I'm sure everyone knows how to use a space gate, so let's get straight to the point." Afterward, the 5 old men used a secret technique at the same time and temporarily closed the barrier. The crowd began to slowly move forward. As powerful pulses of energy constantly appeared, people were sent away through the space gate one by one. Very soon, it was the turn of the Tianqin clan. Only now did Jianshun see the appearance of the space gate. It was a 3-meter-tall circle of light. The space around the circle of light violently distorted and pulsed. It was extremely unstable, but the circle of light was several 100,000 kilometers away. It was extremely wondrous. Below the space gate was a profound and complicated formation. A few Class 5 monster cores were fixed in the surroundings, supporting the space gate formed by the formation. Chapter 287. Although the space gate of the Great Zhou Kingdom was open to everyone, it was not free. Anyone who passed through the space gate would have to hand over a few Class 5 monster cores to the experts of the Great Zhou Kingdom. The amount varied, but it was calculated based on the number of people. Each person would receive a Class 5 monster core. This price was indeed rather difficult to bear for the Xia family and the Huatian sect of the Blue Wind Kingdom. However, the people who could come were all peak organizations of their respective kingdoms. There was no lack of peak Heaven Saint Masters among them, so a few Class 5 monster cores were nothing to them. Although the Tianqin clan had sent 40 people, most of them were there to protect the group along the way, just in case something happened. There were less than 10 people who were actually going to Mercenary City. The Great Elder of the Tianqin clan led everyone to the space gate. He glanced at the people behind him before handing over a few Class 5 monster cores to a Heaven Saint Master who stood guard beside the space gate. He said, "There are 9 of us in total. Here are 9 monster cores." The Heaven Saint Master from the Great Zhou Kingdom smiled as he accepted the monster cores from the Great Elder. He said, "Go on. I hope you'll be able to achieve good results." After exchanging some pleasantries with the Great Elder, he directly stepped into the space gate. With just a single step, he crossed several 100,000 kilometers and arrived on the other side of the Tianyuan continent. Afterward, Jianshan and Ming Dong emerged from the crowd under Qin Zhao's signal. They walked in an orderly manner toward the space gate. Aside from the Great Elder, Zhou Tian, the 3 mercenaries, and Jianshan, there was also a cold-faced, middle-aged man who was going through the space gate. He wore black robes, and his stiff face seemed to never smile. However, his eyes were extremely sharp, flickering with a cold light from time to time. Jianshan, this person is called the Zither Master, but he's not a direct descendant of our Tianqin clan. He's an abandoned child that my grandfather picked up a few decades ago. He's very cold, but because he was raised by our Tianqin clan, he's extremely loyal to us. At the same time, his talent for cultivation is pretty good. Adding on the fact that he works very hard on cultivation, he successfully broke through to Earth Saint Master 3 years ago. Qin Xiao explained in a low voice in Jinshan's ear. He looked at the Zither Master with a rare trace of respect. Afterward, the people from the Tianqin clan passed through the space gate one by one. When Jianshan stepped through the space gate, he felt as if he had passed through an invisible barrier of energy. Afterward, he arrived on the other side without feeling anything else. This was a forest filled with lush greenery, and there were already over 100 people scattered around. They were all people who had arrived here through the spatial door first. I never thought that there would actually be such a wondrous thing in this world. I wonder what kind of heaven-defying abilities the supreme expert who created the space gate possessed. Jianshan sighed inside. He yearned for that goal as well, hoping that he could reach that height one day. Let's go. Mercenary City is up ahead. Once everyone had arrived, the Great Elder of the Tianqin clan led everyone away. Since mounts could not be brought over through the space gate, they all chose to travel on foot. Even though that was the case, they still moved very quickly. The forest was not large. After leaving the forest, there was a plain. As far as the eye could see, there were quite a few people like Jinshan's group traveling in the same direction. From time to time, there would be groups of people riding magical beast mounts that would kick up large amounts of dust as they flew away. There were also quite a few flying magical beasts that rapidly flew through the sky. Everything was the same as when Jinshan's group left the Tianqin clan. However, the difference was that they had changed from riding flying magical beasts to traveling on foot. Along the way, Tianzhou's cold gaze would sweep past Jianshan from time to time. If it were not for the Great Elder, he probably would have attacked Jianshan long ago. Jianshan ignored Tianzhou's gaze, which made Tianzhou gnash his teeth in anger. He desperately hoped that Jianshan would talk back to him. That way, it would be perfectly justifiable for him to teach Jianshan a lesson. For hours later, Jianshan's group finally arrived at Mercenary City under the lead of the Great Elder of the Tianqin clan. Mercenary City was a huge city. It was extremely vast, but unlike other cities, Mercenary City did not have walls. It could be entered from all directions. In the sky above the city, a huge energy barrier shone with a faint golden light as it enveloped the surroundings, enveloping the entire Mercenary City. All of you, remember that fighting is prohibited in Mercenary City. Otherwise, you will receive extremely severe punishment. Moreover, there are many powerful factions that we cannot afford to offend inside. You should all behave yourselves and avoid causing trouble." The great elder of the Tianqin clan sternly stared at the crowd as he spoke with a stern expression. "Yes, great elder." The people of the Tianqin clan replied politely. Afterwards, they followed the crowd into Mercenary City. Although Mercenary City did not have walls, the layout inside was no different from other cities. Various shops and inns filled the streets and alleys. The mercenary gathering would only begin half a month later. Jinshin's group found an inn in the city to stay for the time being. On the second day, they strolled around Mercenary City with Qin Shao and Ming Dong. The great elder of the Tianqin clan vanished on the second day. Just like in the imperial palace of the great Zhou kingdom, no one knew where he had run off to. He did not restrain them too much. The following days were relatively peaceful, but more and more people gathered in Mercenary City. In the end, all the inns in the city were filled with people, and large amounts of tents had been set up outside the city. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. The next morning, the great elder of the Tianqin clan suddenly appeared before leading everyone to the center of Mercenary City. "Ming Dong, stay in Mercenary City for now. Be careful," Jinshin warned Ming Dong as they walked. Ming Dong nodded and patted Jinshin's shoulder. "I understand." "Jinshin, you have to return safely. I'll be waiting for you here." The great elder at the front suddenly turned around and glanced at Ming Dong. He said indifferently, "Mercenary City is an extremely safe place. There's probably no safer place in the world. Remember, you can't fight with anyone in Mercenary City. Otherwise, no one will be able to save you." "Thank you for your warning, Senior." Ming Dong clasped his hands and said politely. Very soon, they arrived at the center of Mercenary City. It was an extremely large square, but it was already filled with people. It was impossible to count the number of people, but there were at least 100,000 of them. A 50-meter-tall statue stood in the center of the square. It was a statue of a middle-aged man, and it was extremely lifelike. It possessed an indescribable charm, as if it had been carved from a real person. He stood with his hands behind his back and his head slightly raised as he gazed into the distance, as if he could see through the world. There were quite a few older people and a few middle-aged men with extraordinary bearings in the square. They all stared at the statue in a daze. Their eyes were filled with respect, as well as a sliver of fear. "Is this statue the founder of Mercenary City? I heard that the founder of Mercenary City was extremely powerful and was said to be invincible. It's a pity that he disappeared countless years ago." According to the records of the ancient times, when the Tianyuan continent was still in turmoil and humans were facing the annihilation of the 100 races, a shocking genius appeared out of nowhere when they were forced to a dead end. He fended off the peak experts of the 100 races all by himself and repelled them in the end, protecting the humans of the Tianyuan continent. This genius founded Mercenary City, which led to the development of the mercenaries on the Tianyuan continent. According to the records of the ancient times, the person who founded Mercenary City seemed to be called Mo Yuntian. He was so powerful that he was said to be the greatest in the world. There was no news of him afterward, so he probably left the world. 100,000 years have already passed since Mo Yuntian's era. No one can live for such a long time. What a pity. Mo Tianyun was a genius of his generation. He was unrivaled in the world, but he still couldn't escape his fate. Chapter 288. Hearing the discussions of the crowd, Jinshin also curiously stared at the huge statue in front of him. Suddenly, an old man in azure robes descended from the sky. The old man was extremely ordinary and did not have anything special that could attract people's attention. Just as the old man appeared, the chi of the world that constantly flowed in the surroundings suddenly came to a standstill. An indescribable pressure filled the surroundings, causing everyone present to feel a heavy feeling in their hearts. With the appearance of the old man, the people in the surroundings all fell silent at the same time. The old man hovered in the air, proudly standing above the heads of the many heaven saint masters below. Looking down at the crowd, he said in an old and calm voice, I now announce that the mercenary tournament that occurs once every 50 years has officially begun. Those who participate, stay where you are. Everyone else, leave immediately." As soon as the old man finished speaking, the crowd below immediately became restless. The older people and those who did not plan on participating all retreated. "Jianshun, take care of yourself," Ming Dong solemnly said to Jianshun before retreating with the crowd. With their departure, the number of people who remained decreased greatly. Even so, there were still several tens of thousands of people. Seeing that the crowd below had gradually calmed down, the old man floating in the air continued to speak. "The mercenary tournament only allows people under the age of 50 to participate. Once people over 50 enter the tournament, they will be mercilessly killed by the power of the enchantment and will be turned into ashes in an instant. Those who are younger than 50 leave immediately. This is your last chance." Subsequently, a few hundred people among the tens of thousands of people slowly retreated, their faces full of unwillingness. Seeing that no one was retreating, the old man waved his sleeve, and countless pitch-black tokens surged out of his sleeve. They were enveloped by an invisible force, and they landed accurately in front of the tens of thousands of participants below. Jianshun extended his hand to catch the black medallion that floated in front of him. It was the size of a palm and was made from an unknown material. It was extremely tough and difficult for external forces to damage it. Moreover, there was a mysterious energy that flowed within it. The old man looked down at the people below and calmly said, "This is the medallion for the tournament. The first elimination round will be held in an independent world. After entering the world gate, you will be sent to any place. The elimination round will last for a year. In this year, the top 500 medallions will be selected while the rest will be eliminated." With that, the old man clasped his hands towards the sky and respectfully said, "Please open the world gate." The world suddenly fell into a strange silence. Over 100,000 people had gathered together, but surprisingly, not a single person made the slightest sound. Only the faint sound of breathing could be heard. Suddenly, a powerful pulse of energy appeared in the sky, which immediately attracted everyone's attention. Everyone raised their heads and saw that the energy in the sky was fluctuating in an extremely unstable manner. The entire space twisted violently. This lasted for around 2 seconds before a speck of multicolored light suddenly appeared. It rapidly expanded from there, forming a huge, multicolored hole that was 100 meters in diameter. It was chaotic inside, making it impossible to see anything. The pitch-black medallions in everyone's hands suddenly emitted a weak, black light. Afterwards, everyone was enveloped by an invisible force and slowly rose into the air, flying towards the multicolored hole. Arg! Suddenly, a miserable scream rang out. A middle-aged man who just got close to the edge of the huge hole had his entire body quickly melted at a speed visible to the naked eye. In a short breath, he completely disappeared from this world, leaving nothing behind. Once a person over 50 years old passes through the World Formation Gate, they will be mercilessly killed by the power of the World Formation Gate. They will completely disappear from this world. Everyone, do not panic. As long as you're under 50 years old, you can safely pass through this gate. The old man floating in the sky said expressionlessly. Those words instantly made many people reveal a panicked expression. Immediately, someone struggled in the air and loudly shouted, "I want to go out, I want to go out, I give up on participating in the competition." Unfortunately, they were enveloped by an invisible force and slowly rose into the air. No matter how they struggled, they couldn't break free from the binding of that force. "I gave you a chance before. Now it's too late." The old man coldly stared at those people and coldly said, "Ark!" Another miserable scream rang out. That voice was filled with endless pain. A middle-aged man was refined alive by the power of the world formation in front of everyone's eyes. Not a single trace of him was left, and he completely disappeared from this world. "I beg you, let us out. Let us out. We give up on the competition." Some people who were over 50 years old and wanted to fish in troubled waters all begged for forgiveness. The old man floating in the air frowned slightly, and a trace of impatience appeared on his face. With a wave of his hand, a burst of invisible power surged out and actually increased the speed of those people flying towards the multicolored hole. Arg! Following a burst of miserable screams, dozens of people who were over 50 years old were directly refined into ashes by the power of the world formation. That scene made everyone's heart jump. As for the older people who left before, they inwardly rejoiced. Afterwards, several tens of thousands of participants were also brought into the multicolored hole by the invisible power and disappeared. Let me in, I also want to participate in the competition. A voice suddenly rang out. Ming Dong rushed out of the crowd and quickly ran to the multicolored hole. With a pleading expression, he loudly shouted to the old man, floating in the air. Everyone's gazes immediately gathered on Ming Dong. They all looked at Ming Dong as if they were looking at an idiot. The time limit for the issuance of the token arrows had already ended. Right now, all the participants were preparing to enter an independent space to participate in the elimination round. How could the expert floating in the air continue to issue the token arrows for him alone? Jianshun, who had yet to enter the multicolored hole, also noticed Ming Dong's abnormality. Immediately, he looked at Ming Dong with a strange expression and confusion. He couldn't understand why Ming Dong suddenly wanted to participate in the competition again. The old man floating in the air frowned slightly. He looked a bit impatiently at the shouting Ming Dong below. Just as he was about to wave his hand and chase him away, his expression suddenly changed. He waved his hand and a black token arrow flew into Ming Dong's hand. He gently said, "You can go in." In a short instant, the old man's attitude towards Ming Dong immediately became friendly. His tone was no longer as cold as before. It was extremely gentle. The old man's attitude towards Ming Dong made the surrounding experts who knew the old man's background all open their mouths wide. Their faces were filled with disbelief. "Looks like this young man's background is not simple," someone softly muttered to themselves. Jianshun also looked at Ming Dong, who was slowly rising up surrounded by mysterious power. He was filled with confusion, unable to understand what Ming Dong was doing. A sliver of worry also appeared on his face. Before, the old man had clearly said that he would be sent to a random place after entering the world gate. It was indeed extremely dangerous for Jianshun to stay in there by himself as an initial great Saint Master. However, Jianshun was powerless to stop him. After Jianshun was sent into the multicolored hole by the black token arrow, he was sent to a random forest. The surroundings were extremely quiet. There were dense trees everywhere. Suddenly, the space around Jianshun began to ripple slightly. A figure suddenly appeared beside him. When he saw who it was, Jianshun immediately became overjoyed. He said in surprise, "Jianshun, it's actually you. Fantastic, you've actually been sent to my side." The person who had suddenly been sent to Jianshun's side was Ming Dong. Ming Dong was startled by the sudden voice and drew his saint weapon out of reflex. However, when he heard the familiar voice, his face became filled with excitement. He immediately put away his saint weapon and happily said, "Jianshun, I've actually been sent to the same place as you. This is fantastic. With the two of us working together, we'll definitely be able to stabilize ourselves here." "Right, Jianshun, weren't you not going to take part in the competition? Why did you suddenly change your mind at the very last moment?" And that mysterious and powerful old man, he actually made an exception and allowed you to join halfway through. Jianshun was confused. A sliver of confusion appeared on Ming Dong's face when he heard that. He said, "I don't know why I suddenly changed my mind to take part in the competition either. Earlier, I felt like something was summoning me here, and the summoning grew stronger and stronger. In the end, it seemed to be able to influence my will. I couldn't even control myself anymore, so I ended up here in a daze." "What? You're saying that something is summoning you here? Can you still feel it?" Jianshun was surprised. What Ming Dong had encountered was really strange. Ming Dong closed his eyes and sensed carefully. He then nodded, "I can still feel it. It's just that the summoning power has weakened by a lot." Jianshun furrowed his brows in thought. He said, "Then can you sense where the summoning is coming from?" To the east. Ming Dong pointed ahead. Jianshan glanced in the direction Ming Dong was pointing in. After a moment of thought, he said, "Let's go over there and see what's summoning you." With that, Jianshan and Ming Dong headed east together. This was an independent world. Jianshan and Ming Dong were currently in a primitive mountain range. The environment here was extremely harsh, filled with venomous insects and insects. Suddenly, Ming Dong, who was walking behind Jianshan, lowered his body and rapidly sank into the ground. He had actually stepped into a swamp that was difficult to see with the naked eye. Ming Dong slammed his hands against the swamp in an attempt to fly out with his own strength. However, Ming Dong's face suddenly changed. He cried out, "Something's bitten my legs. Jianshan, help me." Jianshan was startled. He immediately grabbed Ming Dong's shoulder and threw him into the air. At the same time, a venomous snake as thick as a water barrel was thrown out. Its entire body was covered in mud, and its two large mouths were tightly biting onto Ming Dong's legs. Jianshan's eyes flashed with a cold light. The light wind sword appeared in his hand, and with a flash of his sword, the venomous snake was cut into countless pieces. Bright red blood mixed with the stench of mud splashed everywhere. Jianshan gently caught the falling Ming Dong. Although the venomous snake's body had been cut in half, its head was still tightly biting onto Ming Dong's legs, causing Ming Dong to grit his teeth in pain. With a wave of Jianshan's hand, a silver light flashed, and the snake's head that was biting Ming Dong was split in half. Ming Dong's legs had already been bitten and were bleeding profusely. The poison had entered his body, causing the skin around his wounds to darken and rapidly expand. Ming Dong immediately pulled out a small, white bottle from his space belt. He poured out some white powder and sprinkled it on the wound. He murmured, "Fortunately, I prepared an antidote in Walrant City. It's extremely famous on the Tianyuan continent. It can cure hundreds of poisons. The only downside is that it's too expensive." Jianshan looked at the wounds on Ming Dong's legs and asked, "Can you still walk?" After applying the antidote, Ming Dong stood up and stretched his legs. He smiled. "Fortunately, the wounds aren't too deep. It's not a big problem, so I can continue forward." "Be careful. Let's continue forward. Who knows how big this world is? So many people have been sent here, but we haven't seen a single one," Jianshan said. "Hold on." Ming Dong arrived before the snake's severed body and unfolded it. He took out a monster core and smiled. "We can't just throw this away. It's such a waste." Jianshan smiled helplessly. The snake was Class 3, so a single Class 3 monster core was not enough to catch his attention. The two of them became even more careful after this. Even with that being the case, the undetectable dangers hidden in the ground still made them suffer a little. Some of the ground was clearly made of mud, but it would suddenly turn into swamps when they stepped on it. It was like quicksand in a desert, dragging them down. Even Jianshan suffered a few times, but he managed to make it through safely. Magical beasts would appear in the primitive mountains from time to time. They were all Class 3 and Class 4 magical beasts, and almost all of them were venomous species. Jianshan and Ming Dong carefully walked through the forest for half a day before Jianshan suddenly stopped. His ears trembled slightly as he listened to the surroundings. A while later, Jianshan smiled. "We've finally come across a living person after walking for half a day. This world sure is big. Several tens of thousands of people have been sent here, but we've only come across one after so long. Jianshan, is there anyone nearby?" Ming Dong understood what Jianshan was implying and asked. No one knew whether he was happy or worried. Jianshan nodded. "That's right. There's one. He's nearby. He seems to be walking in our direction. I wonder what his strength is like. If he's an Earth Saint Master, we'll be in trouble." Ming Dong became rather stern. Chapter 289. Jianshan and Ming Dong continued forward and soon met up with the person up ahead. The other party was a skinny, middle-aged man. His face was covered in dust, and he was in a sorry state. His clothes had been torn by the thorns and were covered in mud. Clearly, he had suffered greatly in the harsh environment of the forest. The middle-aged man immediately became cautious when he saw Jianshan and Ming Dong. He immediately drew his saint weapon, But when he saw the youthful faces of Jianshan and Ming Dong, he immediately became less cautious. We've finally seen two living people after walking for so long. I say, this world sure is big. So many people have been teleported here, but we haven't seen a single one of them. The person who created this world is just too great. The middle-aged man chuckled as he wielded his sword. The middle-aged man chuckled. He was relaxed, but his eyes were fixed on the two of them. The light in his eyes flickered with uncertainty. Jianshan chuckled as well and agreed. Yeah, this space is indeed very big. We've been walking for so long before we've come across a single living person. Looks like we really are fated. Brothers, may I know your names? The middle-aged man smiled as if he was completely harmless. We've never met before, so it's not convenient for me to tell you. Jianshan smiled faintly. Whatever. The middle-aged man did not mind at all. His gaze constantly swept past Jianshan and Ming Dong as he said, "This mercenary gathering is not a good place. It's filled with danger, so it's not suitable for the two of you to participate. It's best if you leave as soon as possible. Of course, leaving the token with you will only cause you more trouble. Why don't you give it to me as well? I'll take care of all your troubles." With that, the middle-aged man gripped his sword tightly and slowly and cautiously made his way towards Jianshan and Ming Dong. A playful smile appeared on Jianshan's face. With a flip of his hand, the token that he had placed in his space ring immediately appeared in his hand. Jianshan waved the token and smiled. "Come and get it if you want it." Seeing the black arrow that had suddenly appeared in Jianshan's hand, the middle-aged man's eyes lit up. He immediately looked at Jianshan's hand and found an exquisite ring on Jianshan's finger. "Spatial ring," the middle-aged man exclaimed. His breathing suddenly became heavy, and the greed in his eyes was undisguised. "No, little brother, that ring on your finger is also a problem for you. Why don't you give it to me along with your token? I'll keep it safe for you. I'll definitely have more of these things with me than in your safety zone. Furthermore, it'll also save you a lot of fatal troubles." The middle-aged man forcefully suppressed his excitement. Even his voice trembled slightly. In his opinion, Jianshan and Ming Dong were still so young. No matter how powerful they were definitely not his opponent. He was already certain of his victory. Jianshan laughed involuntarily. He glanced at the skinny middle-aged man mockingly and said, "You'll be able to fool a 3-year-old with those words. There's something wrong with your head. Do you really think we're idiots?" Ming Dong could not help but curse from behind Jianshan. The middle-aged man's eyes turned cold, and his face immediately sank. He sneered, "Little brothers, I'm only doing this for your sake. It's indeed very dangerous for you to carry these things on you." As he spoke, the middle-aged man was only 10 meters away from Jianshan and Ming Dong. The large sword in his hand began to emit faint energy fluctuations as he prepared to attack at any moment. Jianshan looked at the middle-aged man with disdain. A high-level great Saint Master was indeed not something that Jianshan placed in his eyes. He said, "The things are in my hands. If you have the ability, then come and take them." The middle-aged man's eyes flashed coldly as he laughed. "Since the two of you are so stubborn, then I'll personally take action." As he spoke, the middle-aged man's saint weapon began to emit Saint Chi fluctuations as it pierced towards Jianshan's heart. He did not hold back in the slightest. Jianshan's eyes flashed with killing intent as the silver light wind sword appeared in his hand. With a flash of silver light, the middle-aged man's large sword was broken in two. With his saint weapon destroyed, the middle-aged man spat out a mouthful of blood. His face turned pale as he fell to the ground, unable to get up for a long time. Jianshan's sword had broken his saint weapon, which was equivalent to a person whose dantian had been destroyed. Not only would he lose all of his years of training, but he would also be greatly injured. This can't be real. Looking at the saint weapon in his hand that had been broken into two, the middle-aged man's face was filled with shock. The destruction of his saint weapon was too big of a blow to him, almost causing him to faint. Furthermore, what made him even more incredulous was that the person who destroyed his saint weapon was actually a young man who appeared to be in his 20s. Ming Dong, who was standing behind Jianshan, also had a face full of shock as he looked at this scene. His face was filled with disbelief. He was also dumbstruck by Jinshan's sword-breaking, a high-level Great Saint Master's saint weapon. How can you be so strong at such a young age? You're pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. The middle-aged man's face was filled with hatred as he spoke. His face was filled with unfairness, and his voice was extremely weak and powerless. I'm not pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. You brought this upon yourself. Jinshan smiled as he replied. He then walked over to the middle-aged man's side and said, "Take the initiative to hand over the things on your body. That way, you'll have a chance to live. Otherwise, I'll end your life right now." Blood continued to flow from the corner of the middle-aged man's mouth. Looking at the saint weapon that had broken into two and was rapidly losing its energy, his face immediately turned ashen. He was so regretful that his intestines turned green. He then slowly took off his spatial belt and threw it to the side. Jinshan used his light wind sword to pick up the spatial belt. Apart from finding a token to enter the competition, he couldn't find anything else. The middle-aged man's clothes were extremely shabby. Shaking his head in disappointment, Jinshan casually threw the spatial belt to the ground before leaving with Ming Dong. "Jinshan, what is your current strength? How did you break a Great Saint Master's saint weapon with a single strike? This is something that even normal Earth Saint Masters would find difficult to accomplish." On the way, Ming Dong could no longer suppress his curiosity and asked the question that had been bothering him. Jinshan smiled and said, "When I left the Tianqin clan for 10 days, I went out into the wilderness to break through my bottleneck. Now, I'm already a first cycle Earth Saint Master." "What? You've already broken through to Earth Saint Master?" Ming Dong's face was filled with shock as he stared at Jinshan in disbelief. The difference between a Great Saint Master and an Earth Saint Master was an insurmountable barrier of life and death. On the Tianyuan continent, less than 10% of people could successfully break through to Earth Saint Master, and most of them were middle-aged men. However, Jinshan did not seem to be more than 25 years old. To be able to become an Earth Saint Master at such a young age was definitely a shocking genius. If news of this were to spread, it would definitely cause quite a stir on the Tianyuan continent. However, Ming Dong's face was filled with doubt as he asked, "What does a first cycle Earth Saint Master mean?" He didn't understand the finer details of the Earth Saint Masters. Jinshan explained, "From Saint to Great Saint Master, there are 3 levels: primary, intermediate, and advanced. However, due to the huge difference in strength between Earth Saint Masters, there are 6 levels, with the first cycle being the lowest and the 6th cycle being the highest." Ming Dong came to a realization and said, "I never thought that Earth Saint Masters would be divided like this. If you didn't tell me, I wouldn't have known." Suddenly, Ming Dong's expression changed and he asked, "That's right, Jinshan, what is the attribute of your saint force?" Hearing this, the light wind sword immediately appeared in Jinshan's hand. Jinshan lovingly stroked the sword's body, and the light wind sword suddenly emitted a hazy, silver light. A sharp sword chi filled the air, and when the light wind blew past Ming Dong's body, he immediately felt as if there were countless swords pointing at his body, causing him to feel a faint stabbing pain. "My saint force is not of the Tianyuan continent's attribute. It is pure sword chi," Jinshan slowly explained. Sword chi was not unfamiliar to the people of the Tianyuan continent. Almost everyone knew that it was a sword that had a strong layer of saint force attached to it. It had a powerful killing power and could be used to attack from a distance. However, this sword chi was not true sword chi. It was condensed from saint force, so to a certain extent, it could not be called sword chi. It could only be called energy because it lacked the sharpness of sword chi. However, Jinshan's sword chi was filled with sharpness. This was true sword chi. True sword chi was much sharper than sword chi that was condensed from energy. Moreover, true sword chi did not need to be formed from a sword. It could be formed from a finger, a tree branch, or even a small rock. Jinshan did not know how his saint force had transformed into true sword chi. It was as if he was born with it, but in his heart, he attributed it to the azure sword spirits residing in his dantian. "What sharp sword chi?" Your sword chi is indeed extraordinary. I feel like its attack power is even greater than fire-attributed Saint Force, Ming Dong exclaimed. The two of them chatted along the way. For hours later, Jianshan and Ming Dong arrived at a place that had been severely damaged. The ground was covered in blood, and two corpses lay on the ground. They were covered in wounds, and from the wounds, they seemed to have been killed by someone. Nearby, two space belts had been casually tossed around. Ming Dong went up to pick up the space belts and check them. He said, "There's no token for the competition, only some miscellaneous items. There's nothing valuable. Looks like they've all been taken away." Jianshan looked around and discovered that quite a few people had left in the same direction. "Let's go. Let's figure out what summoned you first. My instincts tell me that it's definitely a good thing for you," Jianshan calmly said. Chapter 290. The two of them continued through the primitive mountain range. Along the way, they discovered the footprints of many people and the corpses of magical beasts. Occasionally, they would see the corpses of some participants as well. They had all been killed and robbed of all their valuables. Roar! Suddenly, a beast's roar rang out from the distance. The sound was filled with anger. Clearly, someone was fighting with it, which had enraged it. Jianshan looked in the direction of the sound and said, "Someone's fighting with a magical beast over there. It's very far away, at least 10 kilometers away." After a moment of hesitation, Jianshan spoke again. "Let's just focus on our journey. There's still a year until the end of the competition. There's plenty of time. It's a bit difficult to collect tokens right now, but when the tokens are concentrated on a few people in the future, we'll only need to rob a random person and we'll be able to obtain several dozen or even several hundred tokens." Jianshan naturally had no objections to Ming Dong's suggestion. Afterwards, the two of them didn't take the initiative to cause trouble and focused on their journey. They passed through the thorny undergrowth and walked through the harsh environment of the primitive forest for 2 whole days before finally making it out of the forest. During this time, Jianshan and Ming Dong also encountered a few other participants. However, because the two of them were just too young, they were looked down upon by everyone. All the participants who saw them tried to steal their tokens, but in the end, they were all robbed by Jianshan and Ming Dong instead. Jianshan killed some of these people and let the others go. Jianshan showed no mercy to those who tried to kill them as soon as they made a move. As for those who only wanted their tokens and didn't intend to kill them, Jianshan showed great mercy and didn't make things difficult for them. He only took their tokens. As a result, Jianshan's number of tokens had expanded from 2 to over 20. It could be considered a small gain. After leaving the forest, they arrived at a boundless plain. Their field of vision was vast, and they could see everything within 5 kilometers. Ming Dong exhaled deeply and gazed into the distance. He murmured, "We've finally made it out of that damn place. And here I thought this world was a primitive forest." After passing through the thorny undergrowth for 2 days, Jianshan and Ming Dong were covered in dust and dirt. Their faces were completely black, and their clothes had been torn apart by the thorny undergrowth. They were no longer able to cover their bodies. There were no rivers nearby, so they couldn't find a water source. Jianshan and Ming Dong took out some water they had collected in the forest from their space belts and washed themselves. And changed into clean clothes, they continued on their way. The two of them continued eastwards. For hours later, 3 figures appeared several kilometers away and hurried towards the two of them. Jianshan and Ming Dong discovered them as well, but they did not pay too much attention to them. They continued on their way. After learning that Jianshan was already an Earth Saint Master, Ming Dong calmed down quite a bit. He was no longer as cautious when he saw people. The 3 figures quickly ran toward Jianshan and Ming Dong. They arrived before Jianshan and Ming Dong before long, blocking their path. 2 of them were middle-aged men in their 40s, and one of them was a young man in his 30s. They glared at Jianshan and Ming Dong, constantly studying them. "Why have you stopped us?" Jianshan asked calmly. Although Jianshan and Ming Dong were young, they were calm and fearless. The 3 of them were unable to see through Jianshan and Ming Dong, so they did not dare to act rashly. The three of them looked at each other before the young man in his 30s clasped his hands at Jianxin and Mingdong. He smiled. I can tell with a single glance that you're no ordinary people, but the two of you are weak after all. You'll struggle to fend off a large group. I wonder if the two of you are willing to join us? We'll form a temporary team. That way, our chances of survival in this space will be much greater, and we'll be able to obtain even more battle medallions. As for the distribution of battle medallions, it'll be based on individual strength. I wonder if the two of you are interested. Not interested. Jianxin rejected without any hesitation before walking past the three of them. Right at this time, the three of them suddenly attacked, brandishing their saint weapons at Jianxin and Mingdong, not showing any mercy. Jianxin coldly snorted, the light wind sword appearing in his hand as a silver light flashed. Just as the three of them were about to swing their saint weapons, three heads flew high into the air. Jianxin's sword was so fast that the three of them did not even have time to react. Three pillars of blood soared into the sky. The three headless corpses were frozen in place for a moment, then fell to the ground one after another. The eyes of the three heads were wide open, and there was still a trace of horror in their eyes that had not completely faded away. Mingdong stepped forward and untied the three spatial belts, taking out a dozen battle medallions and a few 3rd and 4th order monster cores. After killing the three of them, Jianxin and Mingdong acted as if nothing had happened and continued to head east. Half a day later, a fierce battle cry reached the ears of Jianxin and Mingdong. They saw a large group of people fighting fiercely in front of them. From the looks of it, they belonged to two different factions, with a total of 50 people. Outside the battlefield, there was a middle-aged man in purple robes standing there with his arms crossed. The scene was a complete massacre. Although the 50 people belonged to two different factions, there was a huge disparity in the number of people. 30 people were chasing after a dozen or so people. The disparity in numbers was so great that there was a huge disparity in strength between the two sides. Very quickly, the battle was over. The dozen or so people were all hacked to death by the 30 people, lying in a pool of blood. Immediately, a person stepped forward to collect the spatial belts of the dozen or so people. Finally, he took out a lot of black competition tokens and respectfully handed them to the purple-robed middle-aged man who was standing to the side with his arms crossed. "Boss, here you go," that person respectfully said with a charming smile on his face. The middle-aged man satisfactorily received the 20 or so battle medallions and put them all into his own spatial belt. His tone was cold as he said, "Unity is strength. Don't worry, if you follow me, I guarantee that everyone will reap great benefits." As he spoke, the middle-aged man casually looked around and saw Jianxin and Mingdong 3 kilometers away. "Go, kill those two for me as well." The middle-aged man pointed at the 30 or so people. The 30 or so people didn't hesitate and immediately raised their saint weapons and rushed towards Jianxin and Mingdong. Jianxin saw this group of people coming and knew that this battle was unavoidable, so he said, "Mingdong, stand back a bit. Be careful." Mingdong didn't try to be brave and retreated 20 meters away. When a group of people was 50 meters away from Jianxin, Jianxin also took out his light wind sword and fearlessly rushed towards the 30 or so people in front of him. Rushing into the crowd, Jianxin was like a tiger in a flock of sheep. His light wind sword became a blur as it continuously slashed across the throats of his opponents, mercilessly reaping their lives. In just a few short breaths of time, the 30 or so Saint Masters who had previously been incomparably ferocious were all lying on the ground with wounds on their throats. Fresh blood continuously flowed out. The purple-robed middle-aged man who was standing in the distance let out a light cry of surprise. His body flashed and turned into a purple blur as he shot towards Jianxin. In the blink of an eye, he had arrived 20 meters away from Jianxin. His eyes were filled with shock as he stared at Jianxin, completely indifferent to the deaths of the 30 or so people. After a while, the middle-aged man looked at Jianxin with more and more shock. This was because he simply couldn't see through Jianxin's strength. In his eyes, it was as if Jianxin was covered by a black veil. What made the middle-aged man even more shocked was that Jianshun was simply too young. Little brother, to have such strength at such a young age, your talent isn't bad. The purple-robed, middle-aged man smiled, not revealing any hostility. It's still okay to kill a few mobs. Jianshun gently smiled as he replied, Little brother, you must be joking. To be able to kill over 30 great Saint Masters in just a few short breaths, and all of them in a single strike, I think you're at least an Earth Saint Master no matter how weak you are. Earth Saint Masters at such a young age are extremely rare on the Tian Yuan continent. I wonder if you're willing to work with me. If we work together, we'll definitely be invincible in this trial space. The middle-aged man had a friendly expression as he took the initiative to invite Jianshun. Sorry, Jianshun refused without any hesitation. Sigh. The middle-aged man sighed as his face was filled with disappointment. He didn't say anything else and turned into a purple blur as he shot off into the distance. Jianshun didn't chase after the middle-aged man. Right now, his thoughts weren't on collecting the tokens at all. Jianshun, that person seems very powerful. Don't tell me he's an Earth Saint Master, Ming Dong softly said as he watched the purple-robed man leave. Jianshun gently nodded. That's right. He really is an Earth Saint Master. He probably chose to leave because he wasn't confident he could defeat me. All right, let's continue on our way. Battles were taking place everywhere on this plain. Some were big, some were small. The big ones had hundreds of people, and the small ones only had a few people. By now, many of the contestants had already started to form groups. They were walking around in various places, looking for prey that had fallen behind. For 3 consecutive days, Jianshun and Jianshun traveled through the plains at a steady pace. The two of them were focused on hurrying along, searching for the source of Ming Dong's summons. They never took the initiative to participate in any battles. However, they did come across obstructions many times, which were easily dealt with by Jianshun. At the same time, their gains from the past few days all ended up in Jianshun's hands. Unknowingly, Jianshun had collected over 100 tokens. Chapter 291. The two of them stopped in the distance. Ming Dong stared at the mountain range shrouded in pink smoke as he said sternly, The feeling of being summoned is coming from the mountain range. However, it's very difficult to get in because of the smoke. Although I have an antidote, I don't know if it'll be able to fend off the smoke up ahead. Jianshun smiled meaningfully. He patted Ming Dong's shoulder and said, Don't worry. Just the smoke won't be able to stop us. Let's go in. All right then. Let's see if we can make in first. With that, Ming Dong took out a small bottle from his space belt. He poured out a fragrant pill and swallowed it before passing another one to Jianshun. Jianshun refused to take the antidote. I don't need this. The smoke can't hurt me. Although Ming Dong was very confused as to why Jianshun was not afraid of the smoke, he knew that it was definitely Jianshun's secret, so he did not ask. He said nothing more and followed Jianshun into the smoke-shrouded mountain range. As soon as they were 20 meters away from the smoke, Ming Dong's face suddenly changed. Black blood began to flow from the corner of his mouth. Ming Dong immediately took a few steps back and took out a small white jade bottle from his spatial belt. He poured out a black pill from it and hesitated for a moment before swallowing it with a pained expression. Only after consuming the black pill did Ming Dong's complexion improve slightly. He stared at the pink smoke up ahead sternly and said, The smoke here is far too poisonous. The deeper we go, the more poisonous it gets. I've already taken the best antidote, but it'll probably only allow me to go 50 meters forward. We won't be able to make it in at all. Jianshun did not say anything. He took out an empty water bottle from his spatial belt and cut his wrist. He dripped some blood into the bottle. Jianshun, what are you doing? Ming Dong was confused as he looked at Jianshun in confusion. Jianshun treated the wound on his wrist simply before handing the bottle of blood to Ming Dong. He said, My blood is the best antidote. Drink it. Ming Dong stared at Jianshun in shock. He asked in surprise, What did you say? Did I hear wrong? Your blood is the best antidote. How is that possible? Ming Dong felt like he had discovered a new continent. Jianshun smiled when he saw Ming Dong's shock. He said, I've already cultivated a body that's immune to all poisons. There are only a few poisons in the world that can harm me. A body that's immune to all poisons? Is there such a physique in the world? Ming Dong was confused and doubtful. Clearly, he didn't know anything about the poison impenetrable physique. Drink it. That way, we'll be able to pass through this area with ease. Jianshun did not explain too much. All right, let me see if your blood has such wondrous effects. Ming Dong smiled as he accepted the bottle from Jianshun. He raised his head and drank all the blood in it. As soon as the blood entered his stomach, a strange energy rapidly spread through his limbs and bones, clearing away all the remaining poisons in Ming Dong's body. Ming Dong was immediately moved when he sensed the changes in his body. He sighed, Jianshun, your blood really can cure all poisons. It's several times more effective than the best and most expensive antidote pill I bought. I guarantee that if you sell your blood, you'll be able to get an astronomical price. Jianshun had no idea how to react to that. All right, let's hurry on our way. After drinking Jianshun's blood, the poisonous smoke was unable to do anything to him as expected. With Jianshun at the front and Ming Dong at the back, they slowly made their way into the depths of the mountain range. The poisonous smoke in the depths of the mountain range grew thicker and thicker. In the end, even their vision was greatly affected. Visibility was extremely low. As they ventured deeper, the poisonous smoke became more and more poisonous. It was over a dozen times more poisonous than outside, but it was still unable to affect Jianshun and Ming Dong. This made Ming Dong sigh in amazement at the wondrous effects of Jianshun's blood more than once. Under the guidance of the summoning force, the two of them advanced in a straight line through the mountain range. They would occasionally encounter a few poisonous magical beasts, but they were all dealt with easily by Jianshun. After walking through the smoke-shrouded mountain range for 6 hours, Jianshun and Ming Dong finally emerged from the range of the poisonous smoke. An extremely elegant valley appeared before them. It was covered in green plants that radiated with vitality. It was very different from the bare mountain range outside. Suddenly, Ming Dong's face became stern. He said with a heavy voice, "Oh no, the summoning force has suddenly vanished. I can't feel it anymore." Jianshun was alarmed by that. This was not a good sign. He studied the valley, and after a while, he said, "Let's look around here. I think the intent that summoned you came from here." Ming Dong thought about it and found it very reasonable. He said, "All right, let's look around first and see if we can find anything." Afterwards, Jianshun and Ming Dong began to wander around the small valley that was filled with vitality. They wanted to see if they could find anything suspicious. "Jianshun, come over here. There's something here." Suddenly, Ming Dong's voice rang out in the distance. Jianshun immediately hurried over when he heard that. He discovered that there was a strange formation before Ming Dong. It flickered with multicolored light as it gave off weak pulses of energy. "It's a space gate." A sliver of surprise appeared in Jianshun's eyes. He never thought that there would actually be a space gate hidden in the smoke-shrouded bare mountain range. The two of them stared at the space gate for a while before Ming Dong suggested, "Why don't we go over and take a look?" Jianshun hesitated slightly before agreeing to Ming Dong's suggestion in the end. Afterwards, Jianshun placed 5 Class 5 monster cores around the space gate as energy to activate it. Once the space gate formed, the two of them directly stepped through it. After passing through the space gate, what appeared before their eyes was a world filled with the fragrance of flowers and birds. Exotic flowers and herbs were planted everywhere. A faint fragrance of flowers permeated the air, spreading in all directions along with the air. Just taking a breath would make one feel refreshed, relaxed, and happy. Suddenly, Jianshun seemed to sense something. He abruptly raised his head and his eyes widened. He was so shocked that he could not close his mouth. A huge palace hovered 100 meters in the air. It was extraordinarily majestic, like a divine hall that would never appear in the world. It did not rely on any external objects, just hovering in the air by itself. So many people were in disbelief. It was a shocking sight. Ming Dong discovered the divine hall very soon as well. He immediately reacted the same way as Jianshun. His eyes widened as disbelief flooded his face. An old man in white robes descended from the sky. landing before Jianshun and Mingdong. The old man had white hair and a ruddy complexion. His white hair was tied into a small bun on his head and secured with an ancient wooden hairpin. His entire body exuded an otherworldly aura, as if he really was an immortal. The old man smiled at Jianshun and Mingdong. He said, "Esteemed guests, our home master has been waiting for quite some time already. Allow me to take you up." The old man did not give Jianshun and Jianshun any time to speak. With a wave of his hand, an invisible ball of energy enveloped the two of them. The old man quickly brought them to the hovering divine hall. Up until now, Jianshun and Mingdong were still a loss. By the time they returned to their senses, the old man had already brought them to the divine hall, where they stood before the entrance. "Esteemed guests, please follow me. I'll take you to see the hall master." With that, the old man made his way into the divine hall. "Hold on, senior. What's going on?" Jianshun asked in a hurry. They were completely confused by the old man's words, unable to make heads or tails of it. "I'm only here on the orders of the palace lord to welcome our esteemed guests. I don't know anything else. You can ask the palace lord about the specifics after you see him," the old man replied with a smile. He was kind and amiable, just like a kind grandfather. "Senior, have you received the wrong people? We're probably not the esteemed guests you speak of," Mingdong said worriedly. Mingdong said worriedly from behind. That mysterious temple master was definitely the master of this temple. It was obvious that he was very powerful. If the powerful temple master found out that they were not the honored guests he had mentioned, who knew what would happen to them? The old man at the front chuckled when he heard Mingdong's words. "Who do you think the hall master is? The hall master is extremely resourceful. Why would he make such a small mistake? All right, stop asking. Once you see the hall master, he'll naturally answer your questions. There are some things that I don't have the right to tell you." Jianshun and Mingdong followed behind the old man uneasily. At the same time, they constantly studied the divine hall. The divine hall was extremely large, and every inch of it pulsed with powerful energy. It was as if the entire divine hall had been constructed from extremely pure energy. There were many halls within the divine hall, but it was extremely quiet. The surroundings were completely silent. There was not a single person in sight. They seemed to be the only people in the large divine hall. Jianshun and Mingdong passed through the halls before stopping before a huge hall in the center. Afterwards, the old man bowed politely at the closed door and said, "Hall master, the esteemed guests have been brought here. You can leave." An ethereal voice came from within the hall. From a voice, one could tell that it was a man's voice. "Yes, hall master." The old man bowed politely before leaving. Only Jianshun and Mingdong remained where they were, at a loss for what to do. "Come in, the two of you." The illusory voice once again rang out from within the hall. Following this voice, the tightly shut doors of the hall slowly and silently opened. Chapter 292. The hall was extremely large and empty. Apart from the throne at the very front, there was nothing else, not even the most basic of pillars. It was unknown how the roof of the hall had been built. A white-robed figure stood with his hands behind his back next to the throne at the very front. He did not give off any aura, but he gave off the impression that he had become one with the world. Jianshun and Mingdong walked side by side, finally stopping at the center of the hall. They clasped their hands towards the white-robed figure at the same time. "Greetings, senior." Sigh. The person sighed deeply. It was just a single word, but it was filled with a sense of vicissitudes. Afterwards, the person slowly turned around. Only then did Jianshun and Mingdong see his appearance clearly. He was actually a middle-aged man who seemed to be in his 40s. He had a shrewd appearance. The white-robed man stared at Mingdong the entire time. His ordinary gaze seemed to be able to see through the mysteries of the world. Nothing could hide from his gaze. After a long while, the white-robed man sighed again. He shifted his gaze away from Mingdong and looked into the sky. It was as if he could see through the roof of the divine hall and into the 9 heavens. He sighed deeply. "It's been 5,000 years, 5,000 years. One day, I've finally found your descendant. I can finally fulfill your final wish. 5,000 years. Jianxin and Ming Dong were shocked when they heard that. Could it be that this middle-aged man, who seemed to be in his 40s, was an old monster who had lived for 5,000 years? However, the two of them did not hear what the middle-aged man said after that. Sigh. The middle-aged man seemed to think of some past matters. He sighed repeatedly before his gaze landed on Ming Dong. He smiled and said, "Child, come here." Ming Dong dilly-dallied, nervously making his way forward. He called out respectfully, "Senior." A palm-sized piece of jade that shone with a jade-green light appeared in the middle-aged man's hand. As soon as the piece of jade appeared, Ming Dong's expression changed. He was unable to move his eyes away from the piece of jade. "Child, do you feel like there's a wondrous calling to you, making you lose control of yourself?" The middle-aged man looked at Ming Dong with a smile and asked gently, "Yes, senior." Ming Dong's gaze never left the ancient jade. "This piece of jade has been with me for 5,000 years. It was given to me by your ancestor in the past. It contains his life's knowledge, and he told me that if I found his descendant one day, I should give this piece of jade to him. Now, I can finally help my old friend complete his dying wish." The middle-aged man's voice was filled with the vicissitudes of life. He waved his hand, and the ancient jade, wrapped in an invisible force, slowly floated over to Ming Dong. Looking at the ancient jade floating in front of him, a strong call from his bloodline appeared in Ming Dong's heart. Ming Dong almost uncontrollably reached out to grab the ancient jade several times, but he forcibly restrained himself. His mind was full of doubts. Everything that was happening right now was making him feel like he was in the clouds. Ming Dong sorted out his thoughts and looked at the middle-aged man in white robes. He asked in doubt, "Senior, did my ancestor really leave this piece of jade behind? Also, who's my ancestor? Don't tell me you've got the wrong person. I've never heard of my ancestor before." Sigh. The middle-aged man sighed again. His voice was filled with sorrow as he murmured, "What a day. I never thought that after 5,000 years, even your descendant would not remember you." The middle-aged man's voice was filled with sorrow. He then looked at Ming Dong and asked, "Child, what's your name?" "Senior, I'm Ming Dong," Ming Dong replied. Ming Dong, Ming Dong. What a good name," the middle-aged man murmured. The middle-aged man murmured a few words before saying, "Child, let me tell you what happened to the Ming family 5,000 years ago." The middle-aged man pondered for a while before raising his head to look at the sky. As if he had sunk into his memories, he slowly said, 5,000 years ago, your Ming family could be regarded as a powerful clan. At that time, a genius appeared in your Ming family, breaking through to Earth Saint Master at the age of 30. He was your ancestor, Ming Etian. Your ancestor Ming Etian and I met by chance. We became good friends and created a mercenary group together. We traveled the world and experienced countless life-or-death battles. We went through life and death together countless times, crawling out from piles of corpses. As a result, your ancestor Ming Etian and I became good friends who went through life and death together. 100 years later, your ancestor Ming Etian and I both reached the peak of Heaven Saint Master at the same time. During those 100 years, the two of us grew tired of being mercenaries, so we left the world of mercenaries at the same time. We came to a remote forest to undergo life-or-death cultivation, preparing to reach sainthood. 10 years later, the two of us broke through to Saint Ruler at the same time. After that, we emerged from seclusion and traveled the Tian Yuan continent. We explored many places of despair and gained some benefits. A few dozen years later, both your ancestor and my strength increased by quite a bit. In the end, we decided to enter the death nest. In a moment of carelessness, I was attacked by a curse. One day, your ancestor, Ming, used his own body to block the curse for me in order to save me. He sacrificed himself to protect me. The middle-aged man became extremely stern when he reached there. His expression was filled with uncontainable grief. He heavily said, "The death nest is the most dangerous place on the Tian Yuan continent. Even with our strength as saint rulers, we were unable to protect ourselves in there. The power of the curse was just too terrifying. Even with your ancestor's strength, he was unable to resist the corrosion of the curse. In the end, he only had 2 months to live. After knowing that he was definitely going to die, your ancestor quietly returned to the Ming family so that he could spend his final days contentedly. However, he never expected that when he returned to the Ming family, everything had changed. The glorious Ming family no longer existed. More than 30 years ago, they were wiped out by an enemy we had once provoked. As for the descendants of the Ming family, they were nowhere to be found. As your ancestor and I spent all our time roaming the Tianyuan continent, our whereabouts were unpredictable. Who knows how far away we were from the Ming family long ago, so we had no idea that the Ming family had been wiped out. Such a tragic fate filled your ancestor with grief. He had never thought that his clan would end up in such a miserable state when his life was about to come to an end. Back then, I was standing beside your ancestor, so I understood his feelings extremely well. He was in so much pain that he wanted to die. 2 streams of blood flowed from his eyes. Afterwards, your ancestor and I searched the entire world for the person who had wiped out the Ming family. It was a pity that although we were quite powerful back then, there were only the 2 of us, and we had offended quite a few clans in the past. Coupled with the fact that over 30 years had already passed, many people had already forgotten about the Ming family's destruction. As a result, many clues had been cut off. In just 2 short months, we didn't find any useful information at all. We didn't even know if there were any descendants of the Ming family who had managed to survive by luck. Speaking until here, the middle-aged man's expression suddenly became sorrowful. He said in a low voice, 2 months later, your ancestor left this world with a face full of regret and unwillingness due to the power of the curse. Before he died, he used his divine sense to engrave everything he had learned in his life into this ancient jade and entrusted it to me. If I meet a descendant of the Ming family one day, I will give this jade to him. It can be considered as fulfilling his last wish. I was filled with grief when he left. Not only was he my best friend, but he was also my best brother. He died for me. So I took the piece of jade he had entrusted to me before he passed away and traversed the entire Tianyuan continent in search of the person who had wiped out the Ming family, as well as any descendants of the Ming family who might have survived. I searched bitterly for 300 years and destroyed many organizations that could have been the culprit, but unfortunately, I was unable to find any descendants of the Ming family at all. This has always been my greatest regret. The middle-aged man let out a long sigh. He looked at Ming Dong gently and said, "It's a good thing that the heavens have eyes. I never thought that I would come across a descendant of the Ming family 5,000 years later. If he knew about it one day, he would be able to rest in peace." Ming Dong had become stunned long ago after listening to the middle-aged man's story. The middle-aged man's words had shocked him far too much. It was an extremely great blow to his soul, so he struggled to accept it for a moment. He had never thought that the Ming family would have such a glorious and tragic story. Jinshin was stunned by the middle-aged man's words as well. What shocked him even more was the middle-aged man's strength. He was a supreme saint ruler, and a saint ruler from 5,000 years ago. He was a supreme existence that Jinshin could only look up to. The middle-aged man slowly arrived before Ming Dong. He looked at Ming Dong like a senior looking at a junior, but also like he was looking at his own descendant. His gaze was filled with love and concern. It was extremely complicated. "Child, you must have come to participate in the mercenary tournament that happens once every 50 years, right?" The middle-aged man gently asked Ming Dong. Ming Dong nodded in a daze. He still hadn't recovered from the shock of what had just happened. "Are your parents still alive?" The middle-aged man continued to ask. "Yes. My parents have always lived in a mountain village, but my grandfather fell off a cliff and died when I was young while hunting in the mountains," Ming Dong replied. The middle-aged man gently sighed. His face was filled with sorrow as he said, "Once the tournament ends, I'll go with you and bring your family over. I'll take care of them for Etienne. I can't just watch Etienne's descendant live such a difficult life. As his brother, I've let him down. I owe him far too much." "Thank you, senior." Ming Dong was overjoyed. With the middle-aged man's care, it would be difficult for his family not to live a happy and peaceful life. After all, This was a saint ruler from 5,000 years ago and a hall master who was revered by heaven's saint masters at the very least. Many people would never be able to see such an expert in their entire lives. The grief on the middle-aged man's face slowly faded away. He smiled and said, "Child, your ancestor and I are best friends. There's no need for you to call me senior. If you don't mind, you can call me Uncle Tion." "Yes, Uncle Tion," Ming Dong called out respectfully. Chapter 293. Afterwards, Ming Dong remained in the divine hall. Jinshin declined Ming Dong's invitation to stay and left the divine hall. Afterward, the old man who had brought Jinshin and Ming Dong up sent Jinshin back down. In the end, they passed through a space gate and returned to the valley shrouded in poisonous smoke. Ling Tian identified the direction and walked out of the valley. However, when he reached the edge of the valley, he stopped and hesitated for a moment before returning to the valley. He started to set up his tent in a secluded place. He changed his mind at the last minute and decided to cultivate here for a period of time. The air in the valley was extremely good and the environment was beautiful. It was extremely quiet here. Aside from a few butterflies dancing in the flowers, there was no other life. Outside the valley, a faint layer of pink poisonous smoke enveloped the surroundings. As far as the eye could see, the sky was covered in a layer of dark red. The poisonous smoke did not disperse, slowly drifting about. However, it did not enter the valley, as if something was blocking it from entering the valley. The poisonous smoke was extremely poisonous. Basically, no one among the participants had the ability to pass through here. At the same time, there was a space gate that led to the divine hall, so the master of the divine hall must have done something to this place. As a result, Jianshan was extremely at ease. He was not afraid of being disturbed during his cultivation and directly entered a deep state of cultivation. Within Jinshan's dantian, the sword spirits slowly revolved around a thumb-sized, multicolored stone. Strands of strange energy radiated from the multicolored stone before fusing with the sword spirits. After absorbing the energy from the multicolored stone, the sword spirits began to slowly strengthen. However, this speed was extremely slow. If one did not pay attention, it would be impossible to notice. In the blink of an eye, Jianshan had stayed in the valley for 10 months. During these 10 months, Jianshan would sometimes cultivate in the tent or practice his sword in the flowers. Although his strength did not increase by much, he was much more adept at using his saint force. His battle prowess was definitely much greater than before. There were only 2 months left until the end of the elimination round. Jianshan originally planned on cultivating here while waiting for Ming Dong to come out, but the remaining time did not allow him to continue waiting. He needed to go out and collect the competition medallions. Jianshan arrived in front of the space gate. He stared at the profound diagram on the ground for a while before gently sighing in the end. He put away the tent and left the valley without any hesitation. Jinshan did not look at the diagram on the space gate again after the first day. The diagram was extremely profound. Although it was only a complicated diagram, it contained the incomprehensible mysteries of the world. It was as if every single line of the diagram drew upon the laws of the world. It was so profound that it was not something Jianshan could understand. After leaving the elegant valley, Jianshan found himself in the dense, poisonous smoke again. He then followed the feeling he had when he first arrived outside. The Bear Mountain Range was enveloped by poisonous smoke all year round, so there were very few plants. Even if there were poisonous flowers and plants that were rare. Jianshan walked through the mountain range for 2 hours. Suddenly, a rustling sound rang out in Jianshan's ears. The sound was dense and connected together. Jianshan immediately stopped when he heard that. He looked in the direction of the sound sternly. Due to the obstruction of the poisonous smoke, Jianshan could only see 100 meters away at most. Very soon, a large swathe of black shadows appeared in Jianshan's field of vision. The black shadows surged over like the tide. Wherever they passed, they would be covered by the black flood. When Jianshan saw the black shadows clearly, his face changed drastically. The black shadows were actually thumb-sized black ants. and there were many fist-sized black ants with a pair of wings flying over quickly in the air. It's actually the god-slaying ants. Jianshun was shocked. Without any hesitation, he immediately ran outside as quickly as he could. The god-slaying ants were extremely famous on the Tianyuan continent. They were a strange species and were not magical beasts. If they were alone, they would not pose any threat, but they lived in groups. They could be in the tens of thousands or even hundreds of millions. Even peak Heaven Saint Masters would not be able to survive if they were surrounded by the god-slaying ants, let alone Jianshun, who was only an Earth Saint Master. The god-slaying ants were extremely poisonous and were immune to most poisons in the world. Only a few poisons could pose a threat to the god-slaying ants. Their shells were extremely thick, almost as thick as steel. People who were not powerful would not be able to kill them at all. Moreover, the god-slaying ants could devour Saint Force of any attribute. The protective Saint Force formed from Saint Force was like a decoration to them. Jianshun had read many records about the god-slaying ants in a few books, but without exception, the best way to deal with the god-slaying ants was to run as far away as possible from them. This was because the god-slaying ants' poison had an extremely strong anesthetic effect. Once bitten, the poison would quickly spread throughout the body, making people feel powerless. They would not even have the strength to run away. The only outcome would be to be eaten by the god-slaying ants. Once bitten by the god-slaying ants, the chances of survival were basically zero unless a miracle happened. Jianshun ran out of the mountain range like the wind and fire. He had no confidence in dealing with tens of millions of god-slaying ants. Behind him, the god-slaying ants had also discovered Jianshun's whereabouts and were in hot pursuit. The rustling sounds of the god-slaying ants crawling on the ground could be heard continuously, making people's hair stand on end. In the sky, some of the god-slaying ants that were the size of a fist and had grown wings had already surpassed their crawling counterparts on the ground and were one step ahead of them in pursuit of Jianshun. Their flying speed was even faster than Jianshun's. Jianshun raised his speed to the limit as he ran through the uneven mountain range. Even though he had the strength of an Earth Saint Master and his speed was several times faster than before, he was unable to display his full speed on the steep mountain path. How could he outrun the god-slaying ants in the air? Not long after, Jianshun was caught by a few god-slaying ants. Helpless, Jianshun could only summon the light wind sword. With a flash of his sword, he stabbed countless times behind him. With a series of ding-ding-ding-ding sounds, a large number of god-slaying ants fell from the sky. Their entire bodies had been cut in two, and black liquid flowed out of them. With this delay, Jianshun was quickly surrounded by even more god-slaying ants. A large group of god-slaying ants flapped their wings and charged at Jianshun without any fear of death. Jianshun's light wind sword was already tightly brandished, forming a net of swords in front of him, blocking the god-slaying ants from approaching. At the same time, he also broke out of the encirclement. Even so, there were still a few god-slaying ants that managed to break through Jianshun's net of swords and pounced on him, opening their mouths and viciously biting down. Under the sharp teeth of the god-slaying ants, Jianshun's body, which was strong enough to block the attacks of a saint weapon, was as weak as tofu, unable to withstand a single blow. Jianshun ignored the god-slaying ants that were biting him and used all his strength to break out of the encirclement. If he continued to be trapped here and waited for more god-slaying ants to catch up, then he would be at the end of his rope. After much effort, Jianshun finally escaped from the encirclement of the god-slaying ants. Without slowing down in the slightest, he used all his strength to escape from the valley. At the same time, he stretched out his hand to grab the god-slaying ants that were biting him. With a squeeze of his arm, the fist-sized god-slaying ants were directly crushed to pieces, causing black liquid to stain Jianshun's entire palm. When the poison of the god-slaying ants entered Jianshun's body, it was cleansed clean by Jianshun's blood, leaving not a trace behind. Although the poison of the god-slaying ants was frightening, it was still unable to harm the golden-striped silver snake's body that was impervious to poison. Behind him, the god-slaying ants that were flying in the air flapped their wings, still pursuing him closely. Suddenly, The mountain rock beside Jianshan split open, revealing a large hole that was as tall as a person. A giant python that was 1 meter thick and had a light red body flew out of the huge hole like lightning. It opened its bloody mouth and bit at Jianshan. Jianshan's mind had been highly focused. His body swayed slightly, narrowly avoiding the attack of the giant python, and then he directly punched the giant python's head heavily. The violent shock from the head made the giant python feel dizzy. Before the giant python could wake up, it was surrounded by the god-slaying ants that were chasing after it. Then, the god-slaying ants fiercely bit at every part of the giant python's body with their sharp teeth. A hissing sound came from the giant python's mouth. Then, the giant python's entire body began to roll violently, smashing the nearby mountain rocks into pieces. A large amount of stone fragments flew all over the sky. The giant python's huge body contained a lot of god-slaying ants. The densely packed god-slaying ants had already covered the entire body of the giant python. Soon, the giant python's body, which was 1 meter thick, was eaten by the god-slaying ants until there was not even a trace of blood left. It had disappeared completely. As for Jianshan, he had already disappeared without a trace. He had successfully escaped the detection range of the god-slaying ants. Outside the mountain range that was shrouded in pink poisonous smoke, a group of about 20 people was gathered here. They were pointing at the bare mountain range in front of them and discussing nonstop. I say, there must be treasures in here. Otherwise, how could such an unusual place appear? Someone said, how could there be treasures in this godforsaken place? Moreover, the pink smoke is highly poisonous. Who among us has the ability to go in? The poisonous smoke wouldn't appear here for no reason. This place is destined to be extraordinary. There must be some secret hidden here. Could there be a senior expert living in seclusion here? I've heard that some extremely powerful senior experts, in order to prevent others from disturbing them during their cultivation, would always release some powerful magical beasts or set up some things to prevent others from entering. I think this place is most likely. That sounds reasonable. However, to be able to set up this place like this, there must be an expert who is good at using poison. I think we should hurry up and leave this place. If we really disturb that senior, then we'll all be finished. Bah, what doesn't know how to talk? Who says we'll disturb that senior expert? We'll all be finished. I don't know if you've heard of this saying before. Meeting is fate. If that senior expert is in a good mood and casually gives us a few pointers or directly accepts us as disciples, then we'll be like carps leaping over the dragon gate. What's in front of us is a great opportunity as big as the heavens. About 20 people stood outside the barren mountain range, shrouded in poisonous smoke, and discussed nonstop. They were all guessing what exactly was in the mountain range. Their opinions were all different. Chapter 294. That person is actually not afraid of the poisonous smoke. He must have some antidote or some treasure on him. Look at his sorry state. He must have suffered a loss inside. His strength shouldn't be too strong. Then it's easy. Let's ask him to hand over the antidote. Then we'll go in and take a look. With so many of us, we'll definitely have a great harvest. Everyone was talking at once. Their expressions were impassioned, and they were all extremely excited. Soon, the figure rushed out of the poisonous smoke. This person was wearing white clothes. His clothes were already somewhat tattered, and there was some blood flowing out from the torn areas. One could vaguely see the wounds inside. He didn't look very old, only around 20 years old. His right hand was covered in black liquid. This person was Jianshan. After rushing out of the mountain range, shrouded in poisonous smoke, Jianshan took a few deep breaths of the clear air outside. Then he let out a long sigh. Previously, he was chased by a large group of god-slaying ants. Fortunately, he managed to escape successfully. Jianshan's gaze casually swept across the 20 people in front of him. He calmly grabbed a handful of soil from the ground and wiped off the black liquid on his right hand. Then he took out a towel from his interspatial ring and wiped his right hand with all his might. That's an interspatial ring. Jianshan's method of taking out the towel was immediately discovered by the people in front of him. Immediately, someone exclaimed, his voice full of surprise. He actually has an interspatial ring. The people in front of him looked at Jianshun with burning eyes. Their eyes were all filled with greed. Then, a middle-aged man shouted at Jianshun, "Brat, who are you? How did you get out of the poisonous smoke?" Jianshun stood up and slowly swept his gaze across the people in front of him. They were all around 30 to 40 years old, and all of them had the strength of Great Saint Master or Peak Great Saint Master. Your question is really strange. I went in from here, so of course I came out from there, Jianshun said leisurely. His eyes stared at the people in front of him with evil intentions. The person who spoke did not understand the meaning in Jianshun's eyes and continued to ask, "Why aren't you afraid of the poisonous smoke inside? What are you using to avoid the poison?" Jianshun chuckled. "It's not convenient for me to tell you." Hearing this, the middle-aged man and the people behind him looked at each other and then waved their hands. A group of people immediately surrounded Jianshun. "Kid, we don't want to take your life. As long as you hand over your interspatial ring and tell us how to avoid the poison, we'll let you go," the middle-aged man shouted at Jianshun. "That's right, we don't kill the innocent. Seeing how young you are, you probably haven't lived long enough. If you want to live, then obediently hand over your interspatial ring and tell us how to avoid the poison," the skinny middle-aged man said to Jianshun. "Kid, look at how soft and tender your skin is. I don't think you'll be able to endure any physical pain. It's better if you obediently do as we say. Otherwise, if we beat your pretty face until it's deformed, don't blame it on us if you can't find a pretty girl in the future." The one who spoke was a burly man. He spoke in a low, muffled voice. He looked very honest, but when he spoke, he was also quite humorous. Jianshun looked at everyone with a smile and said, "Looks like you guys aren't unforgivable people. I won't make things difficult for you. Take out your entry tokens, and I promise I won't hurt you guys." Jianshun's words caused the 20 or so people to be stunned. Then they all laughed in anger. Someone immediately shouted, "This kid is quite arrogant. Everyone, let's teach him a lesson." "Let me do it," a burly man volunteered. He strode out of the crowd and threw a punch at Jianshun. Seeing the fist coming straight at him, Jianshun shook his head lightly. He casually raised his right hand and grabbed the fist tightly. Then he exerted some force, and the sound of bones breaking could be heard. The burly man's fist was crushed by Jianshun. "Ah, let go, let go, let go, it hurts." The burly man let out a miserable cry and hurriedly begged for mercy. Such a shocking turn of events shocked the rest of the people, following which, their expressions immediately became somewhat solemn. I was fucking blind to actually run into a little genius. "Brothers, let's use our weapons." Then, the 20 or so people took out their saint weapons and attacked Jianshun. Jianshun put two of his fingers together, and a strand of sharp sword chi was emitted from them. It was a foot long and emitted a faint light. Then, his figure swayed and turned into a series of afterimages that moved around the field. As he spoke, the sword chi rapidly danced. In just a breath's time, Jianshun had circled around the 20 or so people at an extremely fast speed. When he came to a stop, the clothes of the 20 or so people had already been reduced to strips of cloth. In the blink of an eye, the previously well-dressed people were all shirtless. There was not a single wound on their bodies. The 20 or so people were all stunned. They stared blankly at their clothes that had been reduced to strips of cloth. Their faces were filled with shock and disbelief. "Everyone, take out your entry tokens." Jianshun stood nearby and smiled at the shocked people. Why? You're actually an Earth Saint Master." A middle-aged man with some eyesight stared at Jianshun in shock and spoke with a trembling voice. His face was filled with disbelief. Hearing that, the other people also paled in fright. They all stared at Jianshun in shock. They found it hard to believe that this young man, who seemed to be in his 20s, was actually an Earth Saint Master. God damn it, I'm so unlucky. A kid with tender skin that I randomly ran into is actually an Earth Saint Master. This is just too unfair. A large man lamented the unfairness of the heavens. He then decisively took off his space belt and threw it in front of Jianshun. He said, "The entry token is in there. I'm afraid you're worried that I'll keep it for myself, so you take it yourself." Afterward, the other people hesitated before taking off their space belts as well. They threw them at Jinshin's feet with pained faces. They all hung their heads dejectedly and listlessly. They were completely different people compared to before. Afterward, Jinshin took out all the entry tokens from the space belts. There were a total of over 150 tokens. Jinshin did not touch the other items in the space belts. He left after taking the tokens. Battles occurred everywhere in this space. Broken arms and corpses of participants could be seen everywhere. Jinshin wandered around by himself. He no longer kept a low profile as he wantonly bought entry tokens. However, it was already close to the deadline of the competition. After 10 months of competition, the entry tokens were basically all in the hands of few experts. Otherwise, they were in the hands of groups of great Saint Masters. The entry tokens of a few solo participants and a few small groups had all been stolen. Jinshin had met quite a few people in the past 2 days, but his harvest was not great. He had only collected a total of over 100 entry tokens. Many people's space belts had already been cleaned out by countless people before him, only leaving behind some food and clothes. Jinshin walked through the desolate land. A group of over 200 people appeared in front of Jinshin's eyes. The battle was extremely intense. Quite a few people had already been hacked to death in pools of blood. The battle lasted for the time it took for an incense stick to burn before gradually coming to a stop. There were over 20 people who had survived. All of them were injured and covered in blood. The 20 people clearly belonged to the same group. They simply treated the injuries on their bodies. A few people who could still move began to clean up the battlefield and collect entry tokens. When the entry tokens were collected, the few people who could still move looked at each other. After that, they made their move at the same time. They brandished their blades at their heavily injured companions who had already fallen to the ground. The few people who were fighting side by side with them earlier had a huge change in expression. They were caught off guard and were all hit in their vital parts. How can you? A person who had his heart pierced and didn't die immediately stared at the few people with an expression of disbelief. He said with difficulty, "You all have suffered such heavy injuries. You already won't be able to live for long. We're only sending you on your way earlier to lessen your pain." A person said righteously, "Ew. You all will receive retribution." After throwing down these words, that person died with a face full of unwillingness. After that, the few people who survived collected all the entry tokens on their bodies and left without looking back. Just when they had taken a few steps, a young man wearing white clothes appeared in front of them, as if out of thin air. He just happened to block their path. This person was Jinshin. "You all are really vicious and merciless. For a few entry tokens, you actually even killed your comrades who fought side by side with you." Jinshin looked at the few people with a calm gaze. His tone was indifferent. There was no fluctuation in his emotions. "Who are you?" Seeing the sudden appearance of Jinshin, the few people's vigilance instantly rose to the peak. They immediately took out their own holy weapons and stared at Jinshin with a face full of vigilance. "The person who will kill you all." Jinshin directly made his move. A 2-foot-long sword chi shot out from the tip of his finger. After that, his figure flashed and arrived in front of the few people. His right hand swept across their necks like lightning. These people had the strength of a great Saint Master, but before they could even see Jinshin's figure, their throats were already slit. Their faces were filled with shock as they slowly fell to the ground. Jinshin arrived in front of the corpses. From their spatial belts, he found a total of 200 entry tokens. This was more than what he had obtained in the past few days. Suddenly, a strange change occurred. The soil around Jinshin was sent flying in all directions as a yellow sand surrounded Jinshin, blocking his line of sight. A figure emitting earth-attributed Saint Chi rushed out from the ground, and with a flash of his blade, a large blade was sent flying towards Jinshin's head. Jinshin coldly snorted and closed his eyes to prevent the yellow sand from entering his eyes. Following that, the light wind sword appeared in his hand. Following the feeling in his heart, the light wind sword transformed into a silver lightning bolt and stabbed towards the side. Ding! Chapter 295. Seeing that his attack had been blocked, the sneak attacker let out a cry of surprise. His hands didn't stop moving as he began to rapidly swing his blade towards Jinshin again and again. Jinshin's light wind sword turned into a blur as he followed the feeling in his heart and his ears. Although his vision was blocked by the yellow sand, it didn't affect his battle prowess much. In the blink of an eye, Jinshin and the sneak attacker had exchanged more than 10 blows. Taking advantage of the fact that the sneak attacker had yet to recover, Jinshin stabbed his sword towards the attacker's throat. The speed of this sword was too fast. In the blink of an eye, it had arrived in front of the sneak attacker. Although the sword chi from the tip of the sword hadn't even touched the attacker's body, it had already caused him to feel a burst of pain in his throat. The sneak attacker turned pale with fright, but his strength wasn't weak either. In this moment of life and death, he quickly withdrew his saint weapon and placed it in front of his throat as he sent a kick towards Jinshin. The light wind sword finally landed on the sneak attacker's blade, leaving a shallow mark on it. At the same time, Jinshin's left hand formed a fist and violently punched towards the sneak attacker's leg. Kacha! The sound of bones breaking rang out as the sneak attacker's leg was broken by Jinshin's punch. Borrowing the force of the blow, the sneak attacker flew backwards, increasing the distance between him and Jinshin. Jinshin also used this opportunity to charge out of the sand-filled region. He glared at the person who had launched the sneak attack. The attacker was a middle-aged man in earthen yellow clothes. He was short and had a pair of tiger-like eyes. He had a thick beard, and he wielded a blade that was over a meter long. It was even taller than Jinshin. Jinshin glared at the middle-aged man and said, "Since when have Earth Saint Masters become ambushers who only know how to sneak up on others?" Hearing this, the short middle-aged man coldly snorted and said, "Humph, stop blabbering. Survival of the fittest. As long as you can obtain the final victory, you will be the king. Who cares what method you use?" The middle-aged man looked at Jinshin with a serious expression. "Brat, I didn't think that you would be so strong despite your young age. You're already an Earth Saint Master at such a young age. Thank you for the praise." Jinshin indifferently smiled and said, "Now, are you going to take the initiative to hand over your token, or do you want me to take it from you? Arrogant. If you want to take my token, then let's see if you have the strength." The middle-aged man growled. He then swung his blade and began to fight with Jinshin. At the same time, a layer of armor condensed from Earth-attributed Saint Force appeared on his body, providing him with a powerful layer of protection. Jinshin's sword moved extremely quickly, forming a sky full of sword images that enveloped the middle-aged man. The sword images were so dense that they overlapped with each other that it was impossible to tell which one was real. Under Jinshin's attacks, the middle-aged man only managed to last for 2 seconds before collapsing. He constantly retreated in a horrible state as several bloody holes and sword wounds had already appeared on his body. If it were not for the armor completely condensed from Saint Force blocking most of the attacks, he probably would have suffered far more injuries. The middle-aged man was shocked. He had never thought that not only would Jinshin become an Earth Saint Master at such a young age, he would also be so powerful. Even though he was at the same level as Jinshin, he was unable to fight back at all. In particular, the speed of Jinshin's sword was so fast that the middle-aged man was unable to react in time. The dense, overlapping sword images dazzled his eyes. The middle-aged man knew that he was no match for Zhang Che, so he no longer continued to fight. He quickly retreated a certain distance before burrowing into the ground and disappearing. He had actually escaped through the earth. Jinshin was stunned by the middle-aged man's move. Staring at the ground where the middle-aged man had disappeared, Jinshin's eyes were filled with surprise. This was the first time he had seen someone escape through the earth. However, the middle-aged man's escape technique was not invisible. Wherever he went, a small bump would appear on the ground. Anyone with some eyesight would be able to identify it. A cold smile appeared on Jinshin's face. He then leapt 30 meters into the air and shot a 3-meter-long sword chi at the speed of lightning towards the bulging bulge. Spurt! The huge sword chi shot into the ground, and a pillar of blood shot into the sky. Jinshin's sword chi had accurately struck the middle-aged man. However, the middle-aged man did not even grunt. He continued to flee into the distance with even greater speed. He had learned his lesson after suffering the first time. He burrowed even deeper into the ground, to the point where it was very difficult to find him from the surface. Although Jianshun could not fly, he could at least float in the air for a short period of time. The only problem was that it consumed a lot of Saint force. Floating 30 meters in the air, Jianshun's sharp eyes constantly scanned the direction where the middle-aged man had escaped. Now that the middle-aged man had burrowed even deeper into the ground, it was very difficult for Jianshun to find him. After a while, the grass in the distance began to sway. Jianshun's expression changed. Without any hesitation, he stabbed out with his light wind sword, sending out tens of powerful sword chi that enveloped the area within a 10-meter radius. The ground was pierced by the sword chi, and dozens of holes as thick as buckets appeared. The flat ground was now riddled with holes. "Little bastard, don't go too far." The middle-aged man jumped out from the ground covered in blood and angrily shouted at Jianshun. Jianshun quickly descended from the sky and rushed towards the middle-aged man without saying a word. If it wasn't for the fact that the middle-aged man had just ambushed him, he would have long since become a ghost under the middle-aged man's blade. How could he still be alive and kicking? Moreover, the middle-aged man was an Earth Saint Master and was very cautious. After 10 months of collecting tokens, he should have already collected quite a few tokens, which was exactly what Jianshun needed. "Motherfucker, little bastard, I will remember today's matter. In the future, I will definitely pay you back 100-fold. The middle-aged man cursed, but he did not dare hesitate. Before Jianshun could catch up, he once again burrowed into the ground and disappeared. "Where do you think you're going?" Jianshun angrily shouted. It was not easy to force the middle-aged man out from the ground, so how could he let him leave so easily? The light wind sword in Jianshun's hand quickly danced, and a large amount of sword chi continuously shot towards the middle-aged man, attacking him indiscriminately. Dust flew everywhere, and blood continuously flowed out from the ground. Although the middle-aged man had the ability to burrow through the ground, he was clearly unable to burrow too deep into the ground. He could only move on the surface of the ground, which caused him to be heavily injured by Jianshun's sword chi. The middle-aged man was once again forced out from the ground by Jianshun. This time, Jianshun did not give him the slightest chance to catch his breath. Turning into a blur, he instantly chased after the middle-aged man, and a sky full of sword chi enveloped the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man could only brace himself to resist, but his body was already heavily injured, so his movements were slightly slower. He was not as nimble as before, so after blocking 2 sword strikes, the third one was pierced through his shoulder by Jianshun. The middle-aged man let out a muffled groan as the muscles on his face began to twitch. At this time, Jianshun's 4th sword strike had already arrived. The middle-aged man's face was filled with shock. His head tilted to the side, and the light wind sword almost brushed past his neck. However, at a speed faster than the middle-aged man could react, the light wind sword sliced through his neck. Pooh! A pillar of blood shot up into the sky as the middle-aged man's head was cut off, dyeing the ground red with blood. Jianshun searched through the middle-aged man's spatial belt and found more than 400 tokens, as well as a purple gold card, 3 Class 4 monster cores, and a few hundred purple gold coins. His harvest could be said to be very plentiful, so he quickly left. Jianshun strolled through the plains like he was taking a stroll. He collected tokens along the way, but he was not satisfied with his harvest. Ever since the matter with the middle-aged man had passed, Jianshun had only collected around 50 tokens in the past 3 days. He had come across quite a few people during that time, but he was not very satisfied with his harvest. Although he had encountered quite a few people, their tokens had already been stolen by others, leaving only the most basic items for them to make a living. 3 days later, Jianshun crossed the plains and arrived at a large grassland. The grass on the grassland was at least half the height of a person, making it difficult to see anything below his feet. In the grassland, there were many different kinds of poisonous snakes. Some of them were even smaller than a meter long, but their poison was very strong. It would only take 2 hours for them to poison a great Saint Master to death. It was as if they were born to be in hiding. They hid in the grass without moving or making the slightest sound. Using the cover of the grass, it was very difficult to detect their presence. During this time, Jinshin's foot was bitten a few times, but it was completely harmless. With his body that was impervious to poison, Jinshin was not afraid of these poisons. At this time, an ear-piercing sound entered Jinshin's ears. Jinshin's eyes immediately became sharp as the light wind sword appeared in his hand and stabbed forward. Dang! A large force came through, causing Jinshin's arm to feel numb. A black crossbow bolt, as thick as an adult's arm, was blocked by the light wind sword. The crossbow bolt was made of steel and had been specially forged, making it very hard. So. The sound of something tearing through the air constantly rang out as steel crossbow bolts, as thick as an arm, shot over from the distance under the cover of the grass. Their target was Jinshin. Jinshin quickly brandished his light wind sword, relying on the sound of the crossbow bolts to parry them. But the impact of the crossbow bolts was so strong that Jinshin's entire right arm felt numb. After blocking the crossbow bolt, Jinshin leapt up from the ground. His feet stepped on the tips of the grass as he sprinted through the air, quickly chasing in the direction the crossbow bolt had come from. During this time, the thick crossbow bolts continued to fly towards Jinshin. Towards these bolts, Jinshin dodged as much as he could and blocked them. Along the way, more than 10 crossbow bolts were blocked by Jinshin, but there were more than 20 that missed. Very quickly, Jinshin arrived at the place where the crossbow bolts were fired. There, he saw 3 strong muscle crossbow carts hidden in the grass. 5 middle-aged men were busily replenishing the crossbow bolts. Jinshin had seen this type of strong muscle crossbow carts in Wake City before. It was a high-level, strong muscle crossbow carts. The power of the crossbow bolts was extremely great. A single bolt could pierce through the body of a Class 1 or Class 2 magical beast and could easily kill a Class 4 magical beast. Even a great Saint Master would not be able to take the crossbow bolts head-on. Chapter 296. Seeing that Jinshin was completely unharmed and had passed through several dozen bolts without any change in expression, the faces of the 5 middle-aged men around the ballista all changed. Crap, he's an Earth Saint Master. Let's run. A middle-aged man with quick reactions immediately yelled out. Afterwards, he no longer cared about the 3 expensive ballistas and fled in all directions. They were smart and did not gather together. Instead, they each fled in a different direction. Only an Earth Saint Master could remain unscathed under the continuous barrage of the ballistas. Jinshin sneered. Suddenly, a 2-foot-long pure sword chi shot out from between his fingers. As the sword chi left his hand, it turned into a silver-white streak of light that shot toward a person with lightning speed. It directly pierced a 2-finger-wide hole in the person's throat. Jinshin shot out 5 more strands of sword chi from between his fingers, killing the 5 people who had fled. Afterwards, he leisurely arrived before their corpses and began to search their space belts. After a while, Jinshin smiled as he looked at the 30 or so pitch-black token bolts in his hand. He nodded in satisfaction. 5 great Saint Masters had over 30 token bolts. It was indeed very rare. It seemed that they had used the special terrain as cover to kill quite a few targets. This was because under the continuous barrage of the ballista bolts, the chances of a great Saint Master surviving was less than 1%. The next day, Jinshin passed through the plains. Suddenly, he caught sight of the footprints left behind by a large group of people. From the footprints, there were at least 100 people. It was quite a large group. Jinshin followed the footprints left behind by the group of people. In the end, he arrived at a steep mountain range. The mountain range was barren, without a single blade of grass. Sword-shaped peaks rose from the ground into the sky, making it difficult to climb. Jinshin observed the footprints on the ground as he randomly jumped around the mountain range. When he climbed up a huge boulder, the sound of battle faintly entered Jinshin's ears. Jinshin looked around, but the surrounding scenery was blocked by the huge mountain rocks, so he couldn't find anything. Moreover, the sound and shadow echoed in the mountain range, making it difficult to pinpoint the exact location. Jinshin looked around, and his gaze finally landed on a sword-shaped mountain peak that was 50 meters tall. He then flew up, and with a few leaps, he was already standing on the peak of the mountain. Standing on the peak, sure enough, Jianshun discovered that there was a large group of people fighting 5 kilometers ahead. There were more than 100 people, and the most conspicuous one was a person wrapped in a layer of faint green light. He constantly flashed in the crowd, and his speed was very fast. No one could touch the corner of his clothes, and wherever he passed, the people around him would fall one after another. A gleam of light flashed through Jian Chen's eyes. He could tell with a single glance that the person wrapped in azure light was actually a wind-attributed Earth Saint Master. He was currently slaughtering 100 great Saint Masters all by himself. The battle lasted for a very short period of time, and out of the 100 great Saint Masters, only 20 were left standing. These 20 people knew that they were no match for the Earth Saint Master, so they didn't continue to fight. They immediately threw down their spatial belts and scattered in all directions. The Earth Saint Master didn't chase after them, but instead began to collect the tokens from the spatial belts. Suddenly, Jianshun jumped down from the 50-meter-tall mountain peak and shot towards the middle-aged man. 5 kilometers away, the middle-aged man who was collecting tokens immediately discovered Jianshun. With his extraordinary eyesight, he could tell that the person who had just arrived was very strong. Immediately, he increased the speed at which he collected tokens. Jianshun continued to leap through the mountain range, quickly closing in on the middle-aged man. In less than 10 breaths of time, he had already crossed the 5-kilometer distance. The light wind sword carried a sharp sword chi as it pierced towards the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man didn't have time to collect the rest of his spatial belt. Instead, he took out a long sword that was as wide as a palm and sent it towards Jianshun's light wind sword. The two weapons collided in midair, and an intense energy fluctuation erupted, causing the hard ground under their feet to crack like a spider web. After the first strike, Jianshun's feet slid, and like a ghost, he appeared beside the middle-aged man. The light wind sword transformed into a hazy sword image as it pierced towards the middle-aged man. Although it seemed like only one strike, Jianshun had already stabbed out 3 times. The middle-aged man's eyes flashed as he thought to himself, "What an exquisite sword technique!" Following which, the large sword in his hand transformed into a hazy sword image and blocked Jianshun's light wind sword. Because the middle-aged man's Saint Force was of the wind attribute, his speed was not much slower than Jianshun's. The two of them moved quickly in the field, and the strong wind they brought along caused a fierce gale to blow around them. The stones on the ground where Sword Shadow was standing were even more densely packed with cracks. Jianshun's sword became faster and faster, and the trajectory of his sword became more and more strange. The middle-aged man found it more and more difficult to block, and slowly, he was forced into a disadvantageous position by Jianshun. The middle-aged man's expression became more and more serious. He never thought that he would meet such a strong opponent today. At such a young age, he was actually able to force a 5th cycle Earth Saint Master into such a state. Suddenly, the light wind sword in Jianshun's hand trembled and turned into a sky full of sword images that surrounded the middle-aged man. The sword images were so dense that they covered the sky and covered the sun, covering every inch of space in front of the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man's face became serious as he quickly retreated. At the same time, the large sword in his hand emitted a dazzling green light. Pointing it towards the sky, he shouted, "Wind, gather!" The green light on the large sword dispersed into thousands of strands, as if it had merged with the surrounding space, creating a tight connection. Suddenly, the wind began to blow, and the sand and stones on the ground were sent flying. Dust filled the sky as a huge tornado quickly formed, trapping Jianshun within it. Jianshun's body was suddenly greatly restricted. The tornado's powerful pulling force continued to pull at Jianshun's body, trying to blow Jianshun into the sky. Jianshun's body seemed to be rooted to the ground, as if he was connected to the earth. His body stood there motionlessly. Although he was able to withstand the tornado's powerful pulling force, Jianshun was also greatly restricted. He was unable to move at all. If his feet moved even the slightest bit, it was likely that his entire body would be blown into the sky by the tornado. The middle-aged man's large sword emitted a dazzling green light as he pointed it towards the sky. Once again, he shouted, "Wild wind dance." As soon as he finished speaking, the tornado spun faster and faster. It was like a sharp wind blade that constantly cut at Jinshin's body. The clothes on his body were immediately torn to shreds, and small wounds appeared on his body. As soon as the blood came out, it was immediately blown away. Jinshin's face immediately became serious. The middle-aged man's strength was beyond his expectations. It could be said that he was the strongest Earth Saint Master he had ever met. Suddenly, Jinshin let out a long roar towards the sky. His voice was so loud that it spread far and wide. Even people tens of kilometers away could hear it clearly. Immediately after, a surge of Saint force surged out from his body as he stomped on the ground. The ground he was standing on immediately cracked open. Withstanding the strong wind, he forcefully charged out from the ground with his light wind sword, mercilessly thrusting towards the middle-aged man who was still in the heavenly sword pose. The middle-aged man was greatly shocked. Jinshin being able to break through the tornado was completely out of his expectations. At that moment, he no longer cared about maintaining the tornado and immediately swung his large sword towards Jinshin. Dang! A loud sound rang out as the two saint weapons collided. A powerful saint chi crazily spread out in all directions, causing Jinshin and the middle-aged man to be forced back a few steps. A layer of purple and green light emitted from the light wind sword. Jinshin brandished the light wind sword, and a finger-sized purple and green sword chi escaped from the sword and shot towards the middle-aged man like lightning. The middle-aged man immediately used his large sword to block in front of him. When the purple and green sword chi hit his large sword, a finger-sized hole appeared on the surface of the large sword. The middle-aged man's entire body trembled as a muffled groan came from his throat. His face instantly became pale white. How is this possible? Looking at the finger-sized hole that appeared on the giant's sword, the middle-aged man's eyes widened, and his face was filled with shock. Jinshin did not stop there. With another wave of his long sword, another finger-sized purple and green sword chi shot towards the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man's face greatly changed. He had already seen the power of the purple and green sword chi and did not dare to meet head-on. He immediately dodged to the side. Jinshin slid forward and stabbed his light wind sword towards the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man's strength was just too strong. Moreover, he also had a battle skill. If he did not use the purple and green sword chi, Jinshin would not be able to kill him in a short amount of time. The middle-aged man's eyes were sharp. With a single glance, he saw the purple and green sword chi on Jinshin's saint weapon. In his mind, he immediately thought of the powerful sword chi that had pierced through his own saint weapon and was scared out of his wits. Without any hesitation, he immediately fled into the distance, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. Jinshin gently sighed as he stared in the direction the middle-aged man had disappeared in. The middle-aged man was an Earth Saint Master with wind-attributed saint force. If he wanted to flee, Jinshin would not have been able to catch up to him. Jinshin couldn't help but feel a little regretful. He had originally thought that he would be able to gain quite a bit, but the middle-aged man was just too strong. Moreover, he was also very vigilant. When Jinshin used the purple and green sword chi, the middle-aged man ran away without a fight. This left Jinshin with no other choice but to watch him leave. Jinshin's gaze swept over the corpses lying not too far away. After a slight hesitation, he went forward and searched through their spatial belts. In total, he found over 30 tokens. If the middle-aged man had not taken some of them, Jinshin's gains would have been even more plentiful. After that, Jinshin continued to wander around the barren mountain range, looking for prey. Chapter 297. Looking at the fireball flying in the sky, Jinshin's expression suddenly froze, faintly revealing an expression of disbelief. Immediately after, when the fireball arrived, he immediately leaped to the side. Boom! Following a deafening sound, The fireball exploded where Jianshan had just been standing, exploding a 3-meter-wide crater in the ground. Gravel filled the sky, like sharp swords, flew in all directions from the explosion. Looking at that huge crater, Jianshan's eyes opened wide, his face full of astonishment. This seems to be an energy shell fired from a magic crystal cannon. After a few breaths of time, another muffled cannon sound was heard, and another fireball was shot from a sword-shaped mountain peak a few kilometers away. Jianshan's gaze locked on that mountain peak, and he quickly rushed over, quickly arriving at the foot of that sword-shaped mountain peak. After a few leaps, he easily climbed to the top of the mountain peak. The area of the mountain peak wasn't large, only 10 meters in circumference. But in the center, there was a 5-meter-wide hole dug by someone, and a pitch-black magic crystal cannon was quietly set up inside. A youth about 30 years of age was lying on the edge of the huge hole, looking outside, looking for the target. That sneaky appearance of his looked very comical. When Jianshan saw this magic crystal cannon, a black line appeared on his head. He didn't expect that he had guessed correctly. The thing that shot the fireball was really a magic crystal cannon. Someone actually brought in a magic crystal cannon during the mercenary tournament's knockout round at this time. That youth seemed to have discovered something strange behind him and abruptly turned back to look. What he saw immediately made him turn pale with fright. Although Jianshan was very young, how could he be a mediocre person if he could silently sneak in here? The youth didn't hesitate for a moment and decisively jumped down from the 100-meter-tall, sword-shaped mountain peak, preparing to escape. Jianshan's body swayed slightly, and he arrived in front of the youth in an instant. He reached out and grabbed the youth who was already in midair, then lifted him up with one hand and casually threw him into the huge crater. "Don't kill me. I'm willing to give you all of my token arrows." The youth knew that there was no hope of escape, so he immediately begged for mercy, his voice filled with panic. Jianshan stood at the edge of the crater and looked down at the youth condescendingly. He asked, "What's your name?" "I'm called Jerica," the youth answered. Jianshan's gaze swept across the magic crystal cannon set up in the crater and then landed on Jerica. He asked, "Do you know how to assemble a magic crystal cannon?" "Yes. I've been studying magic crystal cannons since I was a child. I'm very familiar with every part of a magic crystal cannon. Even with my eyes closed, I can assemble a magic crystal cannon in a very short time," Jessica hurriedly said. A happy smile appeared on Jianshan's face, and he said, "Do you want to live?" "Yes, great hero, please let me go. I'm willing to give you everything I have." Jerica's voice carried a hint of pleading. Jianshan jumped into the crater and then took out several large metal boxes from his space ring, filling the peak of the sword-shaped mountain peak to the brim. Jianshan pointed at the large metal boxes and said, "If you teach me how to assemble these parts, I'll let you go, and I'll even give you a lot of rewards." Hearing that, the youth opened one of the large metal boxes with some surprise and doubt, revealing two strangely shaped pieces of steel. This is actually the base of a magic crystal cannon." Jerica recognized the part with a single glance, and he exclaimed in surprise. Jianshan also let out a sigh of relief when he saw Jerica recognize the part so quickly. The large pile of parts had been with him for quite some time now, but unfortunately he did not know how to assemble them, so they had become a pile of trash. Now that he finally had the chance to assemble a magic crystal cannon, Jianshan felt a little excited. This was a powerful weapon that could kill Earth Saint Masters. Although he already possessed the strength of an Earth Saint Master, and regular Earth Saint Masters could not threaten him, this magic crystal cannon was still very useful. "Open them all, and see if you have the ability to assemble them. I hope you don't disappoint me," Jianshan indifferently said from the side. "As long as it's a magic crystal cannon, there's no problem that can stop me. I have the ability to fix anything that goes wrong." Jerica's voice was filled with great confidence. It seemed that he had been researching magic crystal cannons for quite some time already. Afterward, Jerica opened the metal boxes one by one and gradually discovered that the materials of the magic crystal cannon were different. A sliver of surprise appeared in his eyes as he said in shock, This is actually a high-level magic crystal cannon. Heavens, this is actually a magic crystal cannon with a range of 20 kilometers. It's enough to kill Earth Saint Masters. Am I seeing things? There's only one magic crystal cannon like this in our Lado Kingdom, and we spent a lot of money to buy it. Hurry up and assemble it for me. The sooner you finish, the sooner you can leave safely. Jianshan impatiently urged from his side. Yes, I'll assemble it immediately. Only then did Jericho realize that his life was still in danger. He could lose his life at any time. Afterward, Jericho began to work with both hands, quickly assembling the various components of the magic crystal cannon. In just an hour, Jericho had assembled the magic crystal cannon 3 times, allowing Jianshan to watch carefully. Although there were over 1,000 components of the magic crystal cannon, Jianshan was extremely smart and had a great memory. He learned how to assemble the magic crystal cannon very quickly. After the high-level magic crystal cannon was assembled, it was extremely large. When the base of the cannon opened up, it took up an area of 10 square meters. Afterward, Jianshan immediately took out a Class 5 monster core from his spatial pouch to recharge the cannon. He excitedly muttered to himself, "Let me test the might of this high-level magic crystal cannon." Jericho's face was filled with pain as he stood to one side. He said, "There's no need to doubt the might of a high-level magic crystal cannon. Using a Class 5 monster core to test, it is far too much of a waste." As the energy from the monster core poured into the magic crystal cannon, the space around the magic crystal cannon began to distort slightly. A violent and surging energy fluctuation was emitted from the magic crystal cannon, giving off a dangerous feeling that it could explode at any time. Jessica couldn't help but take a few steps back. Even he couldn't withstand the surging energy waves from the high-grade magic crystal cannons. Bang! The charging was completed quickly, and with a loud sound, the advanced magic crystal cannon began to fire. A dazzling fireball shot out from the barrel of the magic crystal cannon, and with surging and violent energy fluctuations, it streaked across the sky and finally bombarded a mountain several kilometers away. Boom! A loud sound rang out in the distance. Dust and smoke filled the sky, enveloping the entire mountain. Countless boulders fell from the mountain, producing loud sounds as they collided with the mountain. A huge mushroom cloud with a diameter of 1 kilometer had already formed in the sky above the mountain, and it was still rapidly expanding. It was extremely terrifying. A while later, when the dust and smoke slowly dispersed, the sword-shaped mountain had already disappeared. It had been destroyed by the magic crystal cannon. Is this the might of a high-level magic crystal cannon? It really is shocking. No wonder it's a super weapon that can kill Earth Saint Masters. Jessica exclaimed as she stared at the sword-shaped mountain peak that had already disappeared in the distance with her mouth agape. Jianshan was also shocked by the might of the magic crystal cannon. It really was worthy of being a super weapon that could kill Earth Saint Masters and blast Class 5 magical beasts to death. It really was extremely powerful. Just the might of this attack was definitely not something an Earth Saint Master could achieve. Jianshan took out 10 Class 4 monster cores and gave them to Jericho. He said, "You can go. This is your reward." Jericho thanked him gratefully and immediately left after taking the monster cores. He seemed to be in a hurry as he fled, as if he was afraid that Jianshan would go back on his word. Jianshan let out a long sigh. These 2 high-level magic crystal cannons in his hands were finally no longer a pile of useless parts. Afterwards, Jianshan once again dismantled the magic crystal cannons into larger parts and stored them in his spatial ring. Just as he finished this action, an ear-piercing sound rang out from behind him. The light wind sword appeared in his hand as he stabbed behind him like a bolt of lightning. Boom! A violent explosion rang out as a surging wave of energy engulfed Jianshan. Following that, Jianshan's body was sent flying as he spat out a mouthful of blood. His face instantly became pale and his clothes became tattered. The mountain peak he had been standing on had completely disappeared. Jianshan's body was like a kite with its string cut as he landed on a nearby mountain peak. He spat out another mouthful of blood as he stared into the distance in shock. 3 kilometers away, on a sword-shaped mountain peak, stood a person wearing yellow robes. Because the distance was too far, Jianshan was unable to clearly see the person's appearance. Jianshan's heart was filled with shock. The opponent's strength was just too strong. Just a single attack was enough to injure him quite heavily. Moreover, the attack had been launched from 3 kilometers away. Jianshan immediately jumped down from the mountain peak and quickly landed on the ground, using the large rocks as cover. The sound of something breaking through the air could be heard from afar as it approached Jianshan's location. Jianshan used the large rocks as cover and used his hearing to pinpoint the opponent's location. He then jumped out from behind the mountain peak and attacked his target. Towards Jianshan's sudden attack, the yellow-robed man was clearly prepared. A 3-finger-wide, 4-foot-long sword appeared in his hand. The sword was light blue in color and had a faint ripple of water on its surface as it emitted a layer of Saint Qi. The yellow-robed man blocked Jianshan's attack with his sword and clashed with Jianshan over a dozen times with lightning-like speed. In the end, the two of them separated. Even though Jianshan's face was pale, he still stood there proudly, unyielding. He held the sword in his right hand and pointed it straight at the yellow-robed man. However, when Jianshan saw the yellow-robed man's appearance, a sliver of surprise immediately appeared in his eyes. The yellow-robed man was actually a girl around 20 years of age. She was extremely beautiful and possessed a heavenly beauty. Her long black hair danced in the wind behind her, and although her eyes were sharp, they were also filled with intelligence. An extraordinary heroic spirit radiated from between her brows. On the woman's back was a 2-meter-long longbow. It was completely golden in color and emitted a faint golden light. It was clearly not an ordinary bow. Looking at the girl, Jianshan frowned slightly as a sliver of thought appeared in his eyes. For some reason, he felt that the girl was somewhat familiar, as if he had seen her somewhere before, but he could not recall where. Chapter 298. Hearing the girl's strange words, Jianshan was stunned. He did not understand what was going on, but then a thought flashed through his mind. A scene suddenly appeared in his mind. Jianshan was shocked. He looked at the girl in yellow in surprise and said in surprise, "It's actually you." This yellow-clothed girl was none other than the girl he had accidentally bumped into when he was bathing in a river near Wake City. She was also bathing in the river, completely naked. Seeing that Jianshan actually recognized her, the girl in yellow recalled the scene from back then. She could not help but feel even more ashamed and angry. Jianshan's image in her heart became abominable and unforgivable. With a shout, she raised her sword and charged at Jianshan. All these years, the yellow-clothed woman had never forgotten the man who had peeked at her body for the first time. She had always hated him to the core and thought of how to punish the person who had peeked at her body. However, ever since they had parted ways at Wake City, she hadn't been able to find any trace of Jianshan. This had caused her heart to be filled with an indescribable anger that she had nowhere to vent. Now that she had seen the person who had peeked at her body, the anger that had been pinned up in her heart for a long time was completely unleashed. She couldn't control the anger that had been building up in her heart. Jianshan's face was solemn. The powerful attack from the girl in yellow had already made him extremely fearful. Even so, he did not feel the slightest bit of fear. His fighting spirit was high as he fought with the girl in yellow. After the two of them had exchanged a few blows, the girl in yellow suddenly realized that Jianshan's current strength was worlds apart from back then. "Earth Saint Master, you've actually broken through to Earth Saint Master. How is this possible? Back then, you were far weaker than me and could not fight back at all. In just a few short years, how has your strength changed so much? You're actually on par with me now." The yellow-clothed woman's face was full of shock. She stared at Jianshan's handsome face in disbelief, clearly unable to accept this reality. Even so, his hands did not stop moving. The sky-blue long sword was filled with powerful water-attributed saint force as it stabbed towards Jianshan. What happened back then was a complete misunderstanding. Even if we continue to fight, we won't be able to determine the victor. Why don't we stop? Even though it had been so long, Jian still felt that he was in the wrong. After all, she was a girl. Not only had he seen her body, but he had also seen the part that he shouldn't have seen. This made him feel somewhat apologetic. Hooligan, don't even think about it. I will definitely teach you a good lesson. As soon as she heard Jian mention the past, the yellow-clothed girl's face was filled with shame and anger. Her anger became even more intense. Then, she quickly retreated a distance and picked up the golden bow on her back. She aimed at Jian and pulled the bowstring. As the bowstring was slowly pulled back, an arrow completely formed from pure energy gradually took shape. The entire bow gave off a powerful pulse of energy. Jinshan's expression immediately changed. He had already guessed that the powerful attack from before was probably shot by the yellow-clothed girl with the help of the bow. Without any hesitation, he immediately dodged and hid behind a mountain. At this moment, the yellow-clothed girl released the bowstring. The arrow, completely formed from pure energy, tore through the air and directly struck the mountain that Jianshan was hiding behind. Boom! With a deafening sound, the 300-meter-tall mountain that Jianshan was hiding behind collapsed. Countless broken rocks rolled down, creating a spectacular sight. Jianshan ran out as if he was running for his life. His body was covered in dust, but his heart was filled with shock. The bow in the girl's hand was just too powerful. He had no idea what kind of weapon it was, but it could actually threaten Earth Saint Masters. Moreover, it was much more powerful than a high-level magic crystal cannon. Just as Jianshan steadied himself, another sword shot out from the girl's hand, flying toward Jianshan with lightning speed. Jianshan's expression drastically changed. He immediately dodged to the side as fast as he could. In the end, the shining golden arrow had basically pierced through Jianshan's body. He had barely dodged it. Boom! With another boom, another sword-shaped mountain collapsed. The power of the arrows from the golden bow was unbelievable. Every single strike was enough to topple a mountain. Even Earth Saint Masters would not be able to do such a thing. They were basically on par with peak Heaven Saint Masters. Jinshan's body constantly flickered as he dodged the girl's arrows. Although the golden arrows were extremely fast, Jianshan was not slow either. He would always be able to narrowly dodge them at the most crucial moment. There were many times when the golden arrows brushed past his body. It seemed extremely dangerous. After suffering once, Jianshan no longer dared to receive the golden arrows so easily. The golden arrows were just too powerful. Just a single arrow was enough to heavily injure him. Damn pervert, if you're a man, don't jump around there. After shooting over 20 arrows, the yellow-clothed girl finally lost her patience and angrily shouted, "If I don't dodge, am I supposed to stand here and be a live target for you to shoot at? I'm not that stupid." Jianshan gloomily replied, "You?" The yellow-clothed girl immediately became speechless. Her cheeks puffed up as she felt extremely annoyed. She hated Jianshan to the core. In the past, she had been thinking about how to cut the person who had peeped at her body into 1,000 pieces. But now that they had met, she suddenly realized that this bastard that she could bully as she pleased had already grown to the same level as her at an unbelievable speed. Even if he was jumping around in front of her, she could not do anything to him. "Ha! Warner, it's all thanks to you making such a big commotion here that I was able to find you. You really made me suffer looking for you." Suddenly, a loud laugh rang out from the distance. On a nearby mountain peak, 5 people had appeared at an unknown time. Hearing this, the yellow-clothed girl's expression suddenly changed. She immediately stopped attacking Jianshan and adjusted her direction. She directly pulled the bowstring and shot at the 5 people on the mountain peak without any hesitation. Whoosh! The golden arrow pierced through the sky, bringing along a burst of ear-piercing sound as it moved forward at lightning speed. The 5 people on the mountain peak immediately jumped down. They actually borrowed the force of the dive to fly towards the yellow-clothed girl. Just as the golden arrow was about to hit them, a layer of transparent barrier suddenly appeared and wrapped around them. When the powerful golden arrow hit the barrier suddenly trembled violently. However, it did not break and successfully blocked the golden arrow. The 5 people inside the barrier were also safe and sound. Luan Don't waste your energy. Your ruler weapon can't hurt me." The youth in the middle of the five laughed. He was not very old and looked about the same age as Ming Dong, about 27 or 28 years old. Ruler weapon? Could it be that the powerful longbow is a king weapon? Jinshan's face was full of doubts. A ruler weapon was very unfamiliar to him. Today was the first time he had heard of it. "Miss Wan you should obediently hand over the ruler weapon. Now that there is no one to protect you, let's see how you can escape from our hands." A middle-aged man standing beside the youth laughed and said with a relaxed expression. The yellow-clothed girl's face was as cold as ice. Her eyes were filled with hatred and anger as she stared at the five people. She angrily said, "You want my ruler weapon? Don't even think about it. After we get out, my Uncle Feng and Uncle Yun will definitely not let you off. They will avenge my Huang family's disciples." "Ha! Miss Wan don't expect elders Feng and Yun. Those two old fellows will naturally be dealt with." The five people quickly rushed over. The youth in the middle laughed without any fear. Hearing this, the yellow-clothed girl's face darkened. She drew her bow and shot out 3 swords to slow down the speed of the five people. She said in a deep voice, "So you're sure family has been scheming for our Huang family's ruler weapon for a long time. Our Sure family is determined to obtain the ruler weapon. Miss Wan you should obediently hand it over. Don't waste your energy." As they spoke, the distance between the five people and the yellow-clothed girl was only 1 kilometer. At this time, the yellow-clothed woman continuously drew her bow. Golden arrows shot out one after another, causing the barrier around the five people to constantly tremble. The violent energy fluctuations had already destroyed the nearby mountain rocks into a mess. The deafening sounds of explosions were incessant. Jianshan was dumbfounded as he watched from the side. The power of the bow was really too great. The arrows shot by the yellow-clothed girl were actually several times stronger than the ones that killed him before. Unfortunately, they were unable to break through the seemingly weak barrier. Although the five people did not suffer any injuries, they were still unable to move forward due to the powerful impact. They were forcibly stopped in their tracks. "Wan don't waste your energy. Using the ruler weapon consumes a lot of your saint force. You won't be able to last long. Once your saint force is exhausted, your fate will be completely in our hands." The young man hiding in the barrier had an evil smile on his face. His eyes were filled with obscenity as they constantly swept over the yellow-clothed girl's body. The yellow-clothed girl was unmoved. She continued to shoot arrow after arrow at them. The sound of explosions in the distance was unceasing. The rumbling sound reverberated throughout the entire mountain range and spread far and wide. The commotion was extremely loud, and it immediately attracted a lot of people. However, everyone carefully hid in the distance and watched. No one dared to stick their heads out. In the barrier, the 4 middle-aged men standing beside the young man took advantage of the gap between the yellow-clothed girl's arrows and immediately rushed out from the barrier. They quickly rushed towards the yellow-clothed girl from 4 different directions. The yellow-clothed girl immediately changed her target. She directly shot out her sword. A golden energy arrow shot towards one of the men with lightning speed. With a rumbling sound, the man was directly sent flying while vomiting blood. Following the violent vibration of the bowstring, another golden arrow shot out. It pierced through the chest of one of the middle-aged men, creating a fist-sized hole in his chest. As the arrow passed through his body, the energy that leaked out shattered his heart and internal organs. In the short time that the yellow-clothed girl had shot 2 men, the other 2 men had already crossed the distance between them and arrived in front of the yellow-clothed girl. The saint weapons in their hands were filled with surging saint force. They mercilessly slashed towards the yellow-clothed girl. At such a close distance, the longbow had already lost its effect. The yellow-clothed girl once again carried the longbow on her back. She took out a 3-finger wide sky blue longsword and began to fight with the 2 middle-aged men. "Luaner, let's see who can save you now." At this moment, the young man covered in a barrier also rushed over. He held a fiery red spear in his hand and joined the battle against the yellow-clothed girl.